Jeremy and Nathan, because Anthony is one, having internet problems and probably recovering from, and probably two, recovering from the fried food. We're going to say it's internet problems. We all know it's gastrointestinal. Don't worry about it. Hope you all had a great week, and we are super jazzed to be back with you guys. How are you two?
You want me to go first? Okay, I'll go first. I still have proceeded to just mostly play 40k in non-competitive settings while I paint up Imperial Guard to be the problem at like Adepticon and whatever events I decide to go to for the next few months until GW nerfs it into the ground, which I assume will happen eventually. Though I think
you know play.
I think that they might get to some other factions first, which we'll talk about later. Just maybe, because there are some problems, and Guard actually might not be one of them at the moment.
They definitely are. I just think
they're definitely
the
a
average Guard player is struggling.
They're definitely a component of the problem, but they aren't the majority of it. But that's for later's discussion. I'm painting a bunch of Guard stuff. I've started painting a Rogaldorn and putting camo patterns on tanks, which is kind of fun.
Did you not cover up the Dorn hole?
No, I left the Dorn hole there so I can put a model inside of it and say that it's supposed to be able to fit there. I didn't actually do it for that reason. I think
like how Eldar players put their wave serpent fronds around Farseers.
Exactly, it's a hole.
The finial's just inside.
Perfectly reasonable.
The things that the WCC says no.
It's good. It's a good thing that Jeremy can hear this nonsense now before a player comes up to him and it's like, yeah, I can totally put Creed inside of the tank. She totally fits inside of that tank. I don't know what you're talking about. Otherwise, it's been a pretty good weekend. I've played a couple games of random nonsense and other random nonsense. I played a game with TJ's Demons into some Tyranid bugs, which was fun. And I have a couple games into World Eaters scheduled for this week with Guard, which should be entertaining. Otherwise, I continue to be a terrible person and actually just skip stratagems now when I'm playing the Guard and Crusade. I'm like, yeah, I just won't reroll all the wounds on this 2-up ballistic skill, rerolling one's Kasserkin unit that's popped out. That ignores cover because it has 3 different regimental doctrine traits. It's nonsensical.
You can go off a podcast co-host,
I can. It's true. I can go off, but
we could go off you. That's what I'm.
I know. I understand. But instead, we're going to go over to Jeremy, who probably had a more interesting weekend than I did.
I did. The get-up is because of that. So I ran an event this weekend, and my players are as special as the stat check community. They joked earlier in the week about buying me a judge's costume and delivered on it on Sunday. And because I refused to wear it for the award ceremony, they said, you have to make it up to us. So here I am wearing this for this episode.
I thought he was trying to dress as a pastor. I'm not going to lie.
No collar.
We can supply. I feel like that's what expenses are for,
We do definitely just have Patreon money that we could use to buy random nonsense with it.
It's fine. They've already said that for the next clash, I'm going to end up with a wig. So last event, it was the gavel. By the time I run Camera Teams, I'm sure I'm going to have a full thing. But yeah, no, the event was a lot of fun. We had 38 players for the weekend. We had one person drop over on Saturday night, which was wild. I've never had, come back the next morning and be like, go to the ringer. I'm sorry, you can't play your last 2 games, but we only had one person drop. And then, it was very fun. A lot of fun just to watch that many games get played. Whole lot of top level sportsmanship and competitive play. Although I got to watch a Disciples of the Red Angel and Chaos Demons list tear through 4 armies in a row and then get tabled in 2 turns by Iron Hands.
Makes sense.
All things back.
Sorry, 3 turns because Angron came back and then died on Overwatch.
In Overwatch.
Iron Hands can Overwatch on 5s, and when the Contemptor Dreadnought is the target of the charge.
It's true. It's just so funny, and like probably the most disrespectful way for Angron to die is to revive himself, charge something, and die in Overwatch to a Dreadnought.
No, the most insulting part about that, the player realized when we were at dinner that because he was playing Disciples of the Red Angel, he has a 1 CP strat to deny Overwatch with any World Eaters unit.
Oh, man.
Just showing that nobody's actually read that section of the book.
No, apparently not. But he had a whole lot of fun just running Angron at people all weekend long, and did exceptionally well with it. It was funny. We were talking when he was sitting at the top table, and he was just like, "Yeah, I came here thinking I'd get 2 wins." Yeah.
Instead,
so no one knows how to deal with Angron apparently, except for Francois and his Iron Hands.
My RTT sure did. He died 10 times in 3 games in RTT this weekend. So
the best part about this list is the list was a bunch of 8-bound and Exalted 8-bound, Angron, Lord Invocatus, Karanak, Bloodletters, 2 units of Hounds, Angron obviously, and 2 Chaos Land Raiders.
Absolute hero, but also that's a Blunderdome list, like just straight up.
Oh, it was beautiful because no one could kill the Land Raiders by the time Angron connected, because they would be so focused on him, and the Land Raiders would just be plinking away with their Soul Shatter las cannons, picking up Blood Tithe points from killing vehicles.
You know, I really wish I lived in this whatever meta that guy was playing in, where people couldn't kill Angron. Dude, I deploy like face cap bloodthirsters like behind the wall and they're dead by the time they get to my opponent. How was Angron crossing the board?
Oh, it was hilarious. I watched him do a full loop around a table against a guard player. He went ruin hopping for the first turn, and the guard player forgot to issue the no deep strike order from his Chimera, and Angron then warp locust in 10 bloodletters, and everything in the guard player's back line was touched. Sometimes you just get lucky.
I've got a lot of feelings about what you just said, and none of them are positive. Sometimes your opponent is going to forget that you can deep strike real close and tag your whole army.
I also watched 10 Bloodletters in Francois' game fail to kill 2 dev squads.
Yeah, that's my. I played 2 games of Bloodletters today. They did about 4 damage combined over 2 games.
Yeah, they're
really sad.
They're not great.
No. Especially when you just can't get the corn. You can't get the corn Warstone points anymore to make them actually 3 attacks.
Yeah.
So they just kind of
go. Yeah. Probably the most amusing was watching 10 Demonettes charge 3 scouts with the intention of wrapping them so that they couldn't be shot. They killed 1 scout. The 2 scouts on return killed 5 Demonettes, who then failed morale, and another one ran away, unwrapping the scouts. And the 1 scout that was in combat ran to morale. So you had a scout sergeant with a thunderhammer and a sniper rifle going, what do I do with these now? There's 3 Demonettes in front of me. And that scout sergeant fell back, and the next turn proceeded to run at the Demonettes and kill them in combat the next turn. There is nothing funnier than seeing a scout sergeant get 5 hits on 3 attacks with a thunderhammer.
Iron Hands are
Space Marines were a mistake. Is ultimately the
free war gear on scout sergeants was a mistake.
Free war gear in general is not a good thing.
You should not have a thunderhammer on a scout sergeant.
No, there used to be a joke. I went to an event back in like 2019, and my round 1 opponent was running 5 scouts in a land speeder with an infernal pistol and a thunderhammer. And I wish I could go back in time and tell me at the time, mocking him on the car on the way back up, that was just eventually going to be the meta build. And that guy was just really ahead of his time, running a 41-point scout sergeant.
Yeah, because now it's only 12.
12. Anyway. As for myself, I had a pretty good week. I got a few games in, but mostly I went to a little RTT up at Saltire. Managed to take that out with Iron Hands, despite all of my good units being in England with Brian at ITT. I played no Land Speeder Iron Hands. I run suppressors and a Thunderfire Cannon, and I can confirm that I could have just not run those and done just as well. Except for the one game where I Tremor Shelled a squad of Possessed, which was great fun.
Nice.
Like the 10 Possessed, Black Rune, I was like, okay, so Tremor Shells, and I can stand 18 away from this and shoot it now. And that was great. That was super fun. I played, traveled up with Chris Irvine, and Chris forgot to put his team in on BCP, so we played round 1.
Nice.
We could have just stayed in bed.
Perfection.
But no, I can't confirm. Iron Hands busted. Martine suppressors are terrible. They were hands down 90 point sandbag. I could have ran literally as good a categories that would have done more with this last game.
It's funny that we address Martine's non-boosted question, but he asked a boosted question slightly earlier.
Look, we have a set time for the boost questions, which is after we've done, which is just before the break, and then at the start of the question, or before the break and after the question round, where we'll guarantee get your super chat questions. But that question specifically offended me, so
we're going to talk about all super chat questions during the question segment, but you guarantee your question will be answered or addressed if you ask a super chat.
Because we're at the point where now we get so many questions, we can't always get to all of them, but all the ones that are in the Discord and all the ones that are super chat, we will 100% get to, and then anything that catches our eye from the main chat. Speaking of that, shall we go into the meta review for the week?
Yeah, let's talk about Nathan reading
chatting crap. So
I mean, that is why people started watching us, right? Is because we just chatted nonsensical crap.
Think that the competitive content is the better stuff. So
all right, fair enough. I guess I'll just talk about this weekend's stats, and then I'll talk about some really shady looking shenanigans from our episode title, which I'm sure everybody's real excited to hear about. But first, I'll talk about our win rate champion of the week, which actually is World Eaters. World Eaters are the number one win rate faction this weekend with a 57.8% win rate. They didn't win any events. They did get 3 top 4s, 6 top 10s, and had an overall over-rep of 1.93. So World Eaters are coming in real hot in their first couple of weeks here. Next up on the win rate bus is Orcs at a 55.6% win rate. Orcs did win an event. They got 6 top 4s and 10 top 10s with an over-rep of 2.4. I will say that they only had like a 4.8% meta representation, which isn't huge, but Marines are kind of dominating the over-rep situation from a pure population standpoint. But Orcs are real good. The ability to provide like early melee pressure is pretty powerful, I think. But we can talk about that a little bit more later, or you can go watch Seth talk about it on his YouTube channel, because I think he's been talking about it a lot. Craft World Elder next at a 6.7% meta representation, a 54.3% win rate, and then Hail of Doom basically got them 2 event wins this weekend, 8 top 4s, 15 top 10s, and a 2.28 over rep. So it seems like Hail of Doom builds are just kind of back in action if you look at those lists. Otherwise, I think it's like Swift Strikes and other stuff, but mostly just Hail of Doom performing really well. Gene Stealer Colt are still in the top 5 at a 2.7% meta representation, so just a little bit under World Eaters with a 54% win rate, no event wins, no top 4s, and just 4 top 10s. So they had a 0 for over-rep, but their win rate is still pretty high.
Gene Stealers, an army that's been around for ages, has a lower play rate than World Eaters already.
Yep. I mean, there are some factions with much lower meta representation, which I'll talk about in a minute. Space Marines are going to round out our top 6. Or Chaos Demons are in the top 5 before I do that. 7.4% meta representation, which means they're still one of the more represented factions. A 53.9, and even though they won some events last weekend, they didn't win anything this weekend. They had a one top 4, 8 top 10s, and an overall over-rep of 0.26. So Demons are kind of up and down depending on what tournaments and who's playing them, is what it seems like to me. And then Space Marines had 183 players for nearly 20% meta representation, which is just going up. Huge numbers. And a 53.1% win rate, 5 event wins, 14 top 4s, 31 top 10s, and a 1.38 over rep. And that's just considering Space Marines as one super faction. If we break it out into the various super factions, we break out the top performing Marine factions, Dark Angels are the number 1. They actually had a 4.7% meta representation, which is more than Gene Stealer Cult. More than basically most of the other super factions, and had a 59.3% win rate. Iron Hands would have been in the top 5 performance for factions as well. They had 101 player. Oh, this is not what I meant for it to be doing. 1 second. Okay.
So broadly,
one second.
Marine players on the whole a lot of the people doing really well, but actually not putting up the best numbers like comparatively for a faction. Like 1.3 at 1.4 times over rep means they're only doing 40% better than they should be, which is like pretty good.
Yeah, but that's if we consider them as a gestalt. I think it's important to look at sub factions real quick because I'll just go through it. I actually managed to filter the data. Dark Angels had the highest win rate of the weekend at a 62.8% win rate and a 2.57 over rep. And that's even making up 5.2% of the meta. So Dark Angels
playing Dark Angels now. A sub faction has a 20% representation rate.
Yep. So that's and then Iron Hands. A new question.
I feel like we should explain this like once every 5 episodes. So this is probably a good time to do it. Overrepresentation is basically the ratio of how well they're doing overall in its top 4s or top 10s. We do over rep for
top 4s.
Top 4. So how much more represented they are in top 4s than they should be. So you would expect an army that has a 20% play rate to make up approximately 20% of top 4s. So roughly, 1 in 5 players. If they have 2 in 5 players, they would have a 2.0 over rep. If they have 2 in 10 players, they would have a half that. So a point. Is that how math works? I don't know. 1 in 10 players, so they would have a 0.5 over rep. There we go. So they would be they would show up half as often in top 4s as you expect. So it's basically a metric of compared to how often they're showing up, how often are they placing or top 4ing rather than placing, because top 3 is a little bit of a messy metric. Sometimes top 4 usually just makes it a little nicer.
And I'm not going to lie,
a semi-final.
There would be 2 other factions in the top 5 from the Marines as sub-factions, which would be Iron Hands and Space Wolves, at a 4.9 and a 2.5% meta representation. So Iron Hands would still be more represented than a large number of pure factions with a 54.9, and then Space Wolves with a 54.5. Space Wolves won 2 events. Iron Hands won 1 event. Iron Hands actually managed to get a below 1 for over rep, but Space Wolves had a 2.35. But I think there's something a little bit more interesting contained within that Iron Hands data. And I think their over rep data is clouded by the fact that pure Iron Hands has a 50% win rate. And when we look at the data and pull out their sub-faction data, if we average out everybody who's using customs, essentially, specifically Master Artisans, it's roughly a 65 to 68% win rate for the Master Artisans builds, which includes Whirlwind of Rage. Whirlwind of Rage and Master Artisans has 132 games played during Arcs of Omen and has a 68% win rate by itself. So what I'm going,
right?
Yeah, just great. Iron Hands is perfectly balanced. It's just Iron Hands players who have the lowest win rate.
Iron Hands is perfectly balanced. The Iron Hands supplement with the successive rules is definitely not.
Yeah, Iron Hands by themselves have a 52% win rate.
Which you sure can have a 6 of Feel No Pain and double wounds or bracketing. You can do that all day long.
Yep.
Yeah. Or you can have yet another reroll and exploding 6s in combat.
Yep. At the bottom of the bucket, we have Adeptus Mechanicus, Thousand Sons, Drukari, Imperial Knights, and Chaos Space Marines. We've started to see like a centralization of meta representation into Space Marines, essentially. A lot of factions have dropped below 3% for meta representation. Some of those are very previously popular factions, like Tyranids are below 3%. Necrons are under 3%. Harlequins are back down to the dozen players who play them, and that's kind of it. Sisters have dropped down to a dozen players. It's actually kind of interesting to watch as like everything just kind of shoves itself into Marines.
To be fair, Harlequin's win rate probably hasn't changed though, because it's the same 12 people playing them that were winning all of the events before.
It's like they're down to like a 49% win rate now. They were at a 60% before Omen, so they have dropped.
They've dropped a lot.
Still fine.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
But it is funny. There are more Dark Angels players than there are combined Sisters and Thousand Sons players.
Mm-hmm.
And there have been more removed rules from the Harlequins data sheet than Harlequins than some armies have.
Yep. Other than that, despite winning an event, Adeptus Mechanicus is the worst performing faction of the weekend. They had a 33.5% win rate, but they still managed to win an event. And they ended up
this guy in chat right now.
Yep. They got 500 points.
Yep.
Shout
The
out to
answer is
Alexander.
they're just going to personally nerf you. Someone will be to your house with an ice pick shortly.
Seth, all you missed. Oh, go ahead. I was going to say, Seth, all you missed since the start of the episode is me telling people to go watch your YouTube videos to tell them about how orcs are good.
And Ilo was all ITT individual matchups are not included in such data because teams is a weird format that doesn't translate necessarily great to singles play, just in terms of what the data correlates. So it just keeps the data cleaner by not including teams data. At some point, we may end up tracking teams data separately, but it would be a whole other thing that requires some different data architecture than we have, basically. And we need more information than we get at the moment for like pairings and things like that, which makes tracking it really difficult. So we usually don't track teams data. It's always super interesting to look at. And like I would definitely recommend having a rundown of like the IDT lists. Like some of the Team England lists are super cool. They were playing like Pure Zinch Demons. We saw Sisters in the top 3, which was a pure like 30 Valor's Heart Sacrosanct list just to like hard tank the guard matchup. So it's definitely a lot of interesting things to look at there, and a lot of things that will always have a lot of repercussions for singles play because a lot of lists get designed for team events that aren't necessarily known for singles play that then become singles lists. So like for example, the GSC list that everybody's been playing with the Industrial Affinity Build started as a teams list and then got adapted and brought into singles play. And we'll see a lot of that. I'm sure we'll see some of the lists. Like Jack Harpster was playing Zinch Demons at Cherokee this weekend, and England won ITT with it. And so I'm sure we'll see a propagation of lists like that where Demons had felt a little bit like people had moved on from them. So yeah, I definitely, it's definitely a super cool format, definitely super interesting. And obviously I love teams personally, as does Jeremy, and Nathan's there. Nathan watches teams.
I definitely love teams events and wish that there were like more realistic ways to participate in them.
Yeah, that's always the problem, right? It's a high barrier to entry. It's a high barrier to data analysis as well because we don't know, we don't know what first offended in a lot of team formats. We don't know like what table choice was done. So yeah, there's a lot of barriers to the analysis of that data, unfortunately. So yeah, we focus purely on the single stuff here, but I'll let you guys get back to that.
One day we will definitely start tracking some of the teams' data. I think we're going to try to for something like WTC. So cool. That's going to be the attempt. So cool. One of the things I wanted to talk about is we do have the CRS ranking system. We have the ELO both and ELO as well. So we have that updated both for player rankings, and then we also have updated it for faction rankings, or rather Jeremy has updated it for faction rankings because this is Jeremy's baby, as it is the Curie ranking system. So one of the more interesting things that I enjoy is as factions get some of their Curies, as it will. And our top moving faction of the weekend is just Dark Angels, who went up 8 spots in the rankings to go up to second, and increased their CRS by 171 points.
Which is like 10% increase on the baseline?
So they went up almost 50. They went up between 15 to 10% in points just by itself. And Marine factions have basically all started to go up. World Eaters are currently in 9th place if people are interested.
And World Eaters will keep going up as they play more games. So the one thing that I think the faction ranking struggles with a little bit is that it is very slow to turn. It requires a lot of games to like actualize it normally. So someone like Harlequins is sitting at the top right now. It probably shouldn't be at the top, but it's not losing enough games to actually knock it down.
Part of that is
just when there's like hundreds of games being played in a weekend, it moves very quickly. It's like Dark Angels had last weekend, they had an average weekend and they moved very little. This weekend they had an insane weekend and they skyrocketed.
Yeah.
So it's the same thing
like Titanicus sits roughly in the middle because nobody plays games at Titanicus, so it can't lose points. So it's always take things like this with a pinch of salt. It's a metric. It's not a tier list. It's a metric. Is basically the gist for that ranking system.
It is. And really, the main reason that I publish the faction rankings is because that informs the CRS. That faction ranking is what your skill rank and the faction you're ranking become a team that is then used to compare to the other team that you're playing against for evaluating who should win that matchup. That's basically the most important part.
It is March. Oh, I don't like that.
I was just going to say we have a meta report that we need to do.
Oh God, I've been so slacking on those because it's really hard to get you guys to actually give me the data and also give me your tier lists. 2 months in a row, I've asked everybody for tier lists and gotten 2 of the 5 I need. So
I've given them back.
I gave them both times.
Yep,
every
I know
time.
You two did. I know you two did.
I do my homework. I promise.
Yeah, the tier list. I will hopefully be getting on that this week. I should have most of Thursday 3 to write that. Cool. But that means I need to harass 7 people. And I have to harass 7 people plus potentially a guest for tier lists. And you guys are just really bad at getting them.
I'll get you the data tonight at least.
That would be wonderful.
I also have to assemble the mission packet and the rules packet for the TTS tournament that we're running that now has like 56 people in it.
Oh yeah, our TTS major, yeah.
Our casual TTS major that I originally was like, man, it'll be great to get 20 players in it, and now it's at like 56 people.
It's like, oh, we need 6 rounds. Fuck.
Yeah. I might actually have to increase the number of rounds.
No, just do a top cut. Do a top cut. Just top 4 does a playoff after 5 rounds.
We'll figure it out. I'll do
something
that.
Like that. It'll be fun.
All right. I'm going to go through CRS
anything else
player
we want to touch on
rankings.
the stats?
We're just going to go through CRS player rankings real quick, and then I want to show off the toolkit again from the meta dashboard just so everybody can see it again.
I'm going to go grab a drink quickly, so you guys do that, and we'll be back in a second.
Sure. So the CRS rankings have been updated by Jeremy. We have Tom Ogden in first place currently, followed by Manny Chima at 2049 and 2046. Mike Porter's in third at 2010. Harpster's at 1999. Chester is in fifth at 1992. Nassim is in sixth. Sam Procopio is in seventh. Vic Vijay is in eighth. Innes Wilson is still in the top 10. And TJ Lanigan is in 10th. One of our big movers is a friend of the show who popped into the top 50, which is Francois Lalonde, who popped up 26 spots into 47th place. And then also a friend of the show, Adam Camilleri, jumped up 11 spots and is now in 35th place. All right, and that's it. And then I do want to just show people this again because I think it's kind of fun. Now I have to figure out how I'm going to do this real quick because this is going to be a slight little nightmare.
Oh, good. I am still in the top 10 of CRS. That's fine.
You are. You're in ninth.
Still a valid statistic. You want me to pull it up, Nathan?
Here.
I have it. Oh, you got it.
I got it in front of me. I just had to find the right way to share this without sharing my whole screen again. So this is Cliff's current baby that we put in a lot of feedback in to get it customized for everybody. So this is the new metadata dashboard meta balance overview, which lets you pick the meta, player faction, player subfaction, DT experience, opponent faction at the top. It lists all of the factions, including Marine subfactions on the left and color codes them based on performance, with blue being over and then peach being kind of in the middle and then towards red being underperforming factions. The cooler part of this is actually pulls out all the subfaction win rates. It gives you all the overrep data and it gives you the meta representation data, which is tagged as player distribution. And if you click on something like Dark Angels or on Iron Hands, and I think Iron Hands is the more interesting of these, it will pull out their win rate, overrep, player distribution, and then it will pull out all their subfaction win rates for that subfaction. So this is where you can see some of the basis for when I'm talking about Iron Hands. Iron Hands as a pure faction are not doing that great, while they're doing roughly balanced, where they're at 52% for a win rate at 420 games played so far in Arcs of Omen. But if you can see Marks of Omen, you can see Master Artisans.
Get Cliff to add play rate to those data on the right-hand side so you can sort by it as well. That would be interesting.
Yep. We can definitely do something like that as well. We can probably add another little tab or something.
Harass Cliff play rate.
Yep. But I think this is the coolest tool that we've come up with recently as a group, and that Cliff has spearheaded a lot. So what I really think is, if anybody wants kind of an at-a-glance perspective of how everything is working out and how the meta's looking, is that this is your place to start. And it lets you look at some hidden features of the data. Another one that I like to pull out is Gene Stealer Cult. So we'll click on Gene Stealer Cult real quick, where you can see that Accustomed to Toil, Cold-Eyed Killers, Industrial Affinity War Convoy has a 64% win rate. Apparently some just have none listed, which has a 70% win rate, which is something we'll have to look at later. But you can see how some of the different Myriad Cult is doing significantly better than others. But you can also see where there are some outliers, like Hive Cult by itself has an 80% win rate, but it's only one person who's been playing that so far in this meta. So yeah, go take a look at that.
Rose had his Pauper Prince's win rate cannibalized by somebody else playing them. Unlucky, bro.
Yeah, we don't record lists just yet. But as Jeremy put in chat, most likely we are currently working on a tool in order to do that. At some point, we will definitely have just a full suite of tools for you all to access on Tableau via the data that we've collected so far for GT plus sized events. That's what I like doing for all y'all. wanted to show off our new toolkit because it's great and very interesting. And now Innes can do the plugs. Go plug, Innes.
Okay. We do a bunch of really awesome stuff, and if you would like to hear more about the behind the scenes on that, or help contribute to some of like the development process, or offer your suggestions, there's a wonderful place to do that. It's called the StatCheck Discord. Did you know you can get access to the StatCheck Discord for the low price of just $5 a month, and you can hear us all talk some random garbage, and also be part of one of the best communities in 40K. It's not a bad price, personally. You can check that out at patreon.com/statcheck. Otherwise, if that's not something that you're interested in, you can check us out at youtube.com/c/statcheck, where you can see our YouTube channel. You can see all of our back videos, all of our bonus content, as well as the other shows on our network, which is End of the Matrix and X1, which are both far better 4K content pieces than we produce, but also a lot more specialized. So, you got to be in the niche for those ones, but they're really good. X1 is getting some of the best reviews of any piece of 4K content I've ever heard, and really, 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 I need to start listening to it. I don't know. It just feels like I couldn't be further from the target audience, but I'm sure it'll be fine. It's always good to understand the demographics. And the End of the Matrix is wonderful content from Typhus covering the team format and all its glory. They just did a bunch of really cool deep dives into the ITT. So if that was something that interested you so that was the International Team Tournament. So if hearing about that when we talked about it briefly earlier was something that interested you, you can check that out. They're both doing fantastic jobs. Those should both also be on the podcast feeds. And then there's also some of the various bonus content. A lot of the bonus content that we were doing has now been just rolled out into its own shows. So there's been a little bit less of that recently. But the Discord is still a great place to get access to all of that as well, that we don't put out onto the regular YouTube. Otherwise, we really appreciate it if you could just drop a like, a comment, drop a subscription on the YouTube channel. All of that super helps us out. And if it's something that you're interested in, you can also now leave super chats on the stream, where you will guarantee you get your question answered, which is a way you can support us on a one-off if you're not up for doing a recurring or you don't do Patreon or anything like that. It's really great. You can support us, and we really appreciate all of it. That's all I have.
Yep, and you get access to our lovely TTS Super Major that we're running now, which has a trophy that I will print and then mail to some poor fool who wins that event. Even Innes, if Innes wins it, I will still paint a trophy and send it to him.
So that he can... I'll just use it to show for more coaching. So that's all I'm really gonna do.
Stat Check member winning the Stat Check Vibe Check League.
Exactly. Yeah. We're just that good that even the people who know what we're gonna do can't stop us.
You can play all sorts of fun people, I promise. And
also me.
And then Innes, who might not be fun to play against. Unless you're really into the masochism side of things. If you're into the masochism side of things.
If you enjoy an hour-long TTS games, it's great.
30 minutes of setup, 20 minutes of talking, 10 minutes of rolling dice.
Yep, because I get tabled by Towson that long.
God, that was beautiful.
That was so sad.
I
suppose I'll also briefly... If you're interested in coaching, we do now offer that. You can check out stat-check.com/coaching, where you can get access to me and Typhus in all of our glory for anything you're looking for in the 40K sphere. If you're looking for a hand, check that out as well.
All right. Do we want to talk some meta stuff then? Do we want to talk about how Dark Angels are ruining the game?
Whinge about Dark Angels for 40 minutes and then do questions.
we could whinge about Space Marines, yeah.
I despise the design decisions the Games Workshop have taken with Space Marines. I don't understand what this Marine book is doing now.
Well, apparently, if you're playing Space Wolves, it's as many Melta and Combi Melta things as you can possibly shove into a list because they've managed to make Combi Meltas free on everything. My opinion is that when you took away all the points cost for all the upgrades, you took away the major lever that was used for balance. So you stripped away all of that, and you basically gave every army the opportunity to take as many of those upgrades as possible, which had a points cost previously for a reason, which I guess it's working for them. Marines are back up to a 20% meta representation, which I think is what GW wants. And
I'm sure they'd be selling a bunch of Marines if they could sell Marines right now. Although I think that might almost be sorted. Who knows?
Yeah, and I think
it's incredible, though, how much of Space Marine Army does not feel like Space Marines right now.
Yeah, it feels much more like a Horde army, is what people have been telling me recently.
You cannot put 5 Space Marines feels like in the 40K sphere should be something that's fairly resilient, right? Based on all of the mythos of a Space Marine and the design philosophy of them being a fairly elite army, they just explode. You cannot put a Marine. A Marine in the open is just dead.
Yeah, unless it's a Deathwing Terminator, they're just dead.
And you don't if you're not Deathwing Terminators, you're still just dead. Like if you try to put Space Wolf Terminators on the board, or like Iron Hands ones, nah, bro, they're gonna die because they're not transhuman and feel no pain and -1 damaged. It's insane how much this book is just become condensed into things that kill you super dead and cost very little, or one thing that can live.
Yeah. No, at the event this weekend, we had my buddy Cody, who was running a 47 Deathwing Terminator list that I had helped him write, because I'd played into a variant of it 2 weeks ago at Stud, and I was just like, here, this is how you can make this list even more obnoxious to play into. Here's throw in the chaplain, give the 5-up litany against mortals, and suddenly even the Grey Knight matchup looks absolutely ridiculous. And I just watched him chew through. He went 3-1-1 because he drew his last game against demons, because apparently demons actually do fairly well into that. And then his one loss was to Francois Iron Hands, who got incredibly lucky, and he failed a 7-inch rerollable charge. And if not, he would lose. He wins that game, failing that charge, and then having a Brick of Terminators just evaporate because they had no buffs on them. Basically barely won Francois the game. I think it was like a 12-8.
Oh god, yeah. Like Codex Warfare. I played a couple games like with Dark Angels just for some coaching and practice, and I was like, all my heavy weapons died on like turn 2, so I was like, all right, I'll just race to Assault Doctrine and go kill things with these Thunder Hammers. And then I got told, and then I realized it was 1 point in the Assault Doctrine.
Mm-hmm.
Like the harder doctrine to score is 1 point. I do not understand the design philosophy behind that.
Well, the thing is that
a little bit
previous to Arcs, it was capped at 5. For the Devastator Doctrine. So you could kill 3 things, get 5 points, and then you were done with it. And you had to move on beforehand. So, like, you killed 3 units turn 1. And
because you got less turns of it, right? You got 1 turn of Dev Doctrine, so it got to be 2 points.
Yeah. But it was scuffed because you never took that, because you never killed any, because it was also, you were never killing enough stuff with tactical and the Tactical Doctrine. And then the Assault Doctrine, you'd get some more kills.
It was kind of okay for Death Watch because you could pick your Death Doctrine.
Yes, but even then, because you you're specializing one way or the other, you were scoring like 8 to 10 points on it. Whereas now, like, my Ravenwing list scores 10 on turn 1 a lot of the time. And then sometimes if it doesn't, because my opponent just deployed everything in the hidden, I'm like, oh, I don't care. I'm a Devastator Doctrine for the entire game. Turn 2, I'll score 10 points on it.
Yeah, it's not a good sector. Shock Tactics is actually really cool. I think it's interesting play and has cool options. I really like that. But it's one secondary. Oath of Moment is as dumb as it ever was.
I think Ashley Thompson in chat makes a good point, which is that you can outplay your opponent and your opponent can still score like a 14 or 15 on Codex Warfare, because it just sticks to the literal, you need to do this thing to win the game, which is you need to kill things with heavy weapons in an army like Iron Hands, where it's built around heavy weapons efficiencies. Yeah. Like, you need to do that. So you equip all your units with heavy weapons. So you're going to score 15 points with it, most likely, across the course of the game, because you don't have to kill that many units to do it.
Especially if everybody's trying to actively participate in the game by doing things like scoring behind enemy lines or R&D. It's like, you primary. Got 4, I got 2. It just takes the edge off of everything your opponent could be doing.
I mean, if you are trying to score primary points at all, right, you're putting yourself in a position where you can get shot by stuff. So you're going to get shot by heavy weapons, or if your opponent is playing a different army, it just puts you in a position to get hit by any other kill secondary.
Also, if you're playing primary, you're giving me Shock Tactics. The games where I don't score well in Shock Tactics are the games where my opponent never held objectives. It feels like I'm okay with that, right? Like, sure, man, I got 8 on Shock Tactics. You didn't hold a point. This feels good for me.
One of the things that was interesting is somebody recently related the Deathwing Terminator to the unnerfed Tyranid Warrior. Like, full, like, you for 33 points, you get a 4-up invulnerable save for the whole game, full transhuman, and a 1-up base save on a Terminator body who is just slower, and that's it. That's the only thing that's wrong.
3 attacks that hits on 4s at strength 8, AP 2, damage 3, instead of 4 attacks that hit on 3s, strength 8, AP 2, damage 2. And a gun, like an okay gun, like 3 shots of strength 5, AP 1, damage 1, or AP 2, damage 1. Not the worst thing in the world, but it was never like the selling point. It was
but Venom cannons are pretty good.
Venom cannons were really good. But again, that's supposed to work. That same Tyranid Warrior is now no transhuman at all, because Leviathan Synapse doesn't get anything now unless it's a monster, and costs 50 points.
Yep.
Yep.
Terminators costing 33 points with any loadout that you can build onto them is a little ridiculous.
Even funnier for the Deathwing because you also give 2 of the guys in the 10-man Cyclones.
Yep. Yeah, which also is just, frankly, I think it's just a rules exploit that shouldn't work. You should not be able to give them a Cyclone missile launcher with an armor.
I mean, it says in the appendix.
I know it does, but it just shouldn't.
I know.
Didn't it used to with Cyclone missile launchers? One of the hands had to be like a targeting array or something like that. I couldn't remember.
You should just have to be locked to Stormbowler and something with the Cyclone missile launcher, frankly.
Mm-hmm. No,
I also hate things like the Rubric Squad, where the Cyclone missile launcher is on the guy with the assault cannon. It just bugs me.
Well, you just give all of the heavy weapons. You just give all the heavy weapons to Jim. Just give all the heavy weapons to Jim.
Jim and Bob have 2 heavy weapons each. It's like, you know that meme where it's like, gee, Bob, how come your mom lets you have 2 wieners? It's that, but like Scarabacol Terminators with heavy weapons.
the like ad from the 50s? Yes.
Yeah.
God.
Oh gosh, no. I mean, but we can talk about. So, I mean, they took away all the levers of balance, right? And they've created some secondary situations, which also have created further imbalances for specifically Dark Angels and Iron Hands, because I think those 2 armies in particular take advantage of all the upgrades being free, and then all the ability to stay in Devastator Doctrine and just massacre your opponent.
And character dreadnoughts are a mistake.
Yes, and character dreadnoughts are a mistake.
Hear me out. Regular character dreadnoughts are fine. The Relic Contemptor is a problem. Like, if you had a regular box knot that was a character, you wouldn't care.
I used to play that because we used to prep for, so back in 8th Ed, when it was like the Father of the Future Feros build, WTC didn't allow Forge World.
Yes.
So I played a Venerable Dreadnought with a missile launcher and a las cannon with that upgrade on it.
Twin las cannon.
Yeah, missile. It was 3 shots instead of you got 4 on the relic Contemptor that you would take instead at the time. That was a lot better than. So stupid.
Yeah, like that's perfectly fine. Make a Redemptor a character, whatever. Do something like that. That's fine. The
character Brutalis would be cool as hell. Give it the Favorite Philippine.
Yeah. The Brutalis Dreadnought
work, does it?
Why not?
I thought that was infantry only.
No, because you used to put it on the Leviathan in Leviathan.
Oh yeah, you were.
That would actually be
really
funny.
They should concentrate in Martyrdom, work on vehicles again, and bring back Leviathan.
No.
We don't need to do that again.
We don't need that energy here.
I mean, I'm actually intrigued to see what people think once the new Missile Marines and the Brutalis Dreadnoughts start hitting tables as well. Because I think the Missile Marines just give Iron Hands an additional toolkit for murdering guards.
They're so expensive.
Yeah, 35 points a model is real expensive on a Marine like model. Mm-hmm. Yes, I mean, they have indirect fire, which is cute, but like it's also a heavy weapon slot.
You have heavy slots to spare in Iron. You can justify one heavy slot on them. Hands. It's not too bad because you're locked into 2 devs, probably 1 Reaper minimum, and then after that it really flex slots. Like you want 2 or 3 extra heavies, but they can be what you want. Like it's not that bad to run like 1 Eradicators, 1 extra Gladiator, 1 squad of these guys, or like double Gladiators, 1 of these. Like it's very, very flexible for what your favorite.
I just don't see them replacing like Gladiators, Eradicators, or even the 3rd Dev Squad.
I've never liked the 3rd Dev Squad. I just think it's super awkward walking on the side. I would rather have it be Eradicators. Because at that point they're just going to be danger close anyway. Whereas with the drop pod, you can really like threaten super weird angles, which you can't do. Because that's a lot of the appeal is like you get the 30-inch of the grav cannons coming in off like coming off anywhere, and then like they can hit charges and stuff like that, which is pretty fun with devs. Eradicators, like you could just go up to like a 4-man squad of Eradicators and leave a slot out for Death Marines. It's that indirect thing that's just. The problem Iron Hands really have is, and I say problem in the loosest sense of the word, the thing that you kind of struggle with when you're really trying to murder your opponent and score a 20-0 instead of a 15-5 is that sometimes there's just idiots on objective and you're out of Vanguard. And
that's true. In which case the indirect would help you there.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, if I kill 4 dudes out of an intercessor squad, I don't really have a resource I can send to go and kill the last dude off your objective to make you commit something new. Mm-hmm. And having 5d3 indirect shots actually, pressures your opponent into, they can't just leave that guy there. And that is actually a thing that Iron Hands, I'm saying struggle in those, like in the turn sense of trying to optimize one of the best lists in the game. it does give you a tool that you don't have, and it allows you to be more flexible with your things like your Vanguard veterans and your land speeders, which are typically what you would use to flip the objectives in that scenario. And you can be a lot more safe with them. So like a lot of the time, the way you play Shockers on an Iron Hands list is you'll put a land speeder onto the objective, shoot the thing off it with the Volcon and the land speeder, and then the land speeder controls it. You send the land speeder in the open so that they have to commit something onto it, which is then in line of sight for you to do that again. If you're there behind a wall, because they're on an objective, it's whether it's player placed or WT setup, where they just know that one dude that got away is behind a wall on the objective. You have to put that land speeder on the other side of the wall, shoot them off it. Yes, you get to control it again, but you're now, you might have to put another thing there to be in the safe position, or you can't see to where the land speeder was, which now that means that you've just started you've stopped that cascade from beginning, and your opponent's no longer going to have to commit resources because they can, shoot the land speeder from safety or charge the land speeder from behind the wall, and they're in a place relatively safely, and you have to then commit even more to get it. If you just, you can put the land speeder in the safe space or in the open space where they have to commit resource to it and shoot the guy off with indirect, you like flip that balance back to your favor. And you can't really do that without something pressure pieces. So like whether you go for like 3 squads of Vanguard veterans or some scouts and speeders that can, disembark and punch you, it just gives you another resource for making that trade happen on your terms, which is definitely like, it's a minor optimization, but I think it's one that could be worth it because they still hit pretty hard when they walk out on like turn 4 or turn 5 when you've diminished your opponent's shooting.
They still have
and they're
5
good at like cleaning up
shots, right? They have 5 lance. They essentially have 5 dark lances.
It's 4 because you'll have the Vanguard launcher on the sergeant.
Yeah, and the Vanguard launcher is good at picking up heavy weapons teams, like
exactly
stuff like that. It's good at picking up marine bodies, like you were talking about, if there's anything left on a point afterwards. And the indirect guns are great at picking up things like the key squad of Castercan who have to start
or at least burning resources out of it. Like if you're hitting the point where like they maybe have to transhuman or double cover it, like anything they have to do to make that squad, like it's resources they don't have to spend at you, it's resources they have to commit backwards. You can also threaten things like 2 squads of mortars. Like the Vanguard launcher can reasonably kill a couple of mortars, and the other 43 shots can go. The other 5d3 shots can go to the other guys, and then that's pretty good odds. You just like cripple 2 squads of mortars. Like they've got to keep the 2 that are near the finial. Like then it just lessens your opponent's options, and that's always a really strong thing as an army that has strong passive scoring game like Iron Hands do. It's also a way to pick up passive scoring on Codex Warfare because you can just kill a dude behind a wall, and your opponent can't just no-sell you on it now. So no, I think 1 squad of 5 definitely has merit. I think I really want to try 30 with Seal of Oath and Ultramarines, but I think that might be a meme. But I do enjoy the idea of just saying to your opponent, so these all reroll to hit and wound against you, and firing 30d3 indirect shots at them. But I think I might just be the problem. So
you definitely just made my local Ultramarines player like super happy because the first thing he thought of when he saw that was reboot and 30 Desolation Marines with Seal of Oath on somebody. You just
run them with you run Storm of Fire and then you just move the tactical weapons so they don't move about.
Yeah. So let's talk more about the other end of it then. So for the two of you, when we're looking. Actually, this is a good time, Jeremy. Why don't you talk about what Dark Angels are doing and like how Dark Angels are kind of playing both with that Ravenwing list and then with that Deathwing list?
Yeah, so there's 2 lists. So the Deathwing list, I already talked about it a little bit. It's 35 to 45, maximum 50 Terminators, almost all of them with Underhammer Storm Shields because it just makes them ridiculously durable. For anyone who doesn't know, Deathwing Terminators are innately transhuman, so they can't be wounded on a 1, 2, or 3 unmodified. So you're only ever wounding them on 4s up on the dice. The Storm Shields give them a 4-up invuln. So basically, the math on them just real annoying because you're wounding them on 4s, they're saving on 4s. If they're sitting next to an Apothecary, they have a 6-up Feel No Pain. If they're running the banner, which they usually are, then the unit that's out front also is -1 damage. They are just obnoxious to remove from the game. Now, a 10-man brick, which is something you would often see in Dark Angels lists, was a little annoying to kill. But now that you're dealing with 4 10-man bricks, most armies just don't have the capacity, the firepower to chew through those. Like I was saying, I watched Francois' Iron Hands list, which is very similar to what Matthew I would just put in the list, which was the Character Dread, 3 Devs, Radicator, Gladiator, 2 Scout Speeders with full of sniper rifles, and and I think 3 of the land speeder Tornadoes with assault cannon and multi-melta, and he killed 36 over the course of a game.
Yeah,
there were still 11 left.
You definitely can kill them as Iron Hands. It really depends on the build. Like the one that won Cherokee, which Steve Collins built, was 3 squads of 30, and then 2 squads of 2 with the Deathwing Command squads, which is like, it's only 35. It's only 34 Terminators, but that was also on player place where you got to guarantee a rune in the center, which means that the Iron Hands are struggle getting angles. If you get to just shoot them for the entire game, Iron Hands will kill Terminators. Like
they will eventually chew through them. The problem is that they're also running towards you. And in this particular list, one of the things that you run in the list is you run the Ravenwing Apothecary with both the Selfless Healer, so he heals flat 3, resurrects a model for free, but you also use the Paragon of the Chapter, which is a stacking Warlord trait, to give him Decisive Tactician, which gives everyone within 6 inches of him +1 to their advance and charge rolls, which means that turn 1, when they're advancing towards you, and then turn 2 when they're charging you, they have +1 and all that. And when you just start rolling 5s and 6s on your advance rolls, you have Terminators moving as fast as Tyranid Warriors used to.
And then there's also the aspect of remembering that when you're chipping these damage on them and they're bringing a guy back to the Ravenwing Apothecary, that guy's coming back at the front of the squad at maximum coherency.
Yeah, he's reducing your charges by 3 inches.
Yeah, it's more than 3 inches because it's a 2-inch coherency plus an 1.5 inch base, right?
Yeah, but you're always at an angle. You're almost never dead on. So it's like 2 3/4.
You usually can't. It's usually going to be more than 3 inches, just from splitting. And then if you're doing things like, if you are running the squads, like not if you're running like the 4th squad, the 4th one's usually not Deathwing. It's the regular Assault Terminator squad, so they have teleport homers. So if you've lost one of those guys, they can go back into the sky, come down, bring the guy back, get a 6-inch charge, 5-inch charge for Deep Strike, within another +2 from the chaplain potentially. You can get things like guaranteed charges from reserve, which is an absurdly powerful mechanic that just punishes you for damaging them. The ways that you deal with them, really, you need like wound rerolls with high AP, which is not super common. We're seeing things like Hail of Doom definitely coming out as an answer to that. Like, I think that's why it's doing so much already, because like the 20 Terminator build will just run out of stuff to that. Whereas like the 30 more, you've maybe just got enough stuff to overwhelm it.
The big problem with the 30 odd one is, at least against Hail of Doom, is that if you put, say, 20 Dire Avengers and a unit of Wind Riders out in the open, and you've doomed a unit.
Missile launchers.
There's 6 Cyclone missile launchers that are all blast shots, and then there's also 2 Talon Masters in that particular list hiding behind that have 4 assault cannons and 4 heavy bolters hitting on 2s, just shredding your resources.
Yeah,
it
is a messed up army.
In my head, it's like even a Kasrkin. Even multiple Kasrkin units over multiple turns, putting mortal wounds into those units, don't really guarantee a dent into those units. Like maybe you kill 2 if they flub their Feel No Pains with mortal wounds. But then even
why are they getting Feel No Pains? Why are you not in finial range?
Well, I mean, you can't always have everything in finial range, but yes, I understand.
If they're running towards you, you should be in finial range.
Yeah, you should be just sitting back.
There should be no situation where you're committing where you don't have finial here, because it's so much better for you, ignoring things like the -1 damage. Guard is definitely an interesting matchup there. I don't think it's too bad for the Deathwing, but it's also not amazing. Like, it's definitely we're going to play the game on the table. It's going
and they have a lot of high strength, high AP, flat 3 damage, which into the unit that doesn't have -1 damage or doesn't have the Apothecary babysitting it because he only has a 3-inch aura, does actually pick up quite a few of them. So that's the Deathwing build. And then there's the Ravenwing build. And of the two, I much more enjoy playing the Ravenwing build because it's
when we say Ravenwing build, we really mean Deathwing, Terminators, and Ravenwing, right?
So
like, this is like the
list that I have only has 8 Terminators in it.
Okay.
Because it has only 8.
There were 9 fingers up though too.
So we should probably talk about the general build, which has been like doing the rounds, which is like the 20 plus Ravenwing plus.
Okay, yeah. So the general core that has been making the rounds lately is 2 10-man bricks of Terminators with the Apothecary keeping them company. Sometimes they have the Ancient for -1 damage, sometimes they don't. That's a tech piece choice.
It's
but then
super
the rest
expensive
of
if you want to keep the CP for the pre-game move on bikes. So you don't always have the Warlord traits to spare.
Yeah, the thing is that the pre-game move on bikes only really comes up for, like if you're running a Black Knight brick, which is not as common nowadays because it does die very badly to Iron Hands, Guard, the Hail of Doom build as an example.
It's also really good at tying up Iron Hands and Guard, but you're definitely opting into that.
But it's a go first requirement. Yeah. It helps you with the coin flip, but you are already doing fairly well if you go first with the rest of the build. So after that, you take fast attack as your dedicated. You're usually taking either some assortment of the following: attack bikes with multi-meltas, land speeder tornadoes with multi-meltas and assault cannons, land speeder vengeances with the plasma battery,
and assault cannons,
or heavy bolters, because that sits you at 36 inches. It's kind of a wash as to which one you take. And then Hammer Strikes or Thunder Strikes, Storm Speeders. Those are kind of the 5 options that you take. 2 sets of 3 of those. Like the build that I have right now is 9 attack bikes and 6 land speeder tornadoes.
Personally, I love the land speeder vengeances, but they're super swingy. Sometimes they just,
and that's my problem with them, is that you need reliability.
I do like being able to pump up to have. I like having 1 just for that damage 4 access into things like Custodes Wardens, but
that is very nice to have. I have found that with all of the tornadoes, I don't have as much of a problem with the ward matchup because it's just so much volume of strength.
Yeah, especially if you're running the reliquary for the 3-inch bubble of capping at 5 invulnerable save, you can melt the ward matchup. It's actually quite nasty.
Yeah, and then the rest of the list usually has Samael, 2 Talon Masters, because that's the most you can take. If you're running attack bikes and or Ravenwing or a regular brick, you'll run the Apothecary. If not, you'll leave the Apothecary at home, depending on how many Terminators you have. And then the last piece of tech that is showing up in almost every list now is the Ravenwing Champion. I'm going to go through what this guy does because he's absolutely silly. You give him the Reliquary of the Repentant. So the first thing that he does is any enemy unit that's within 3 inches of him, if they have an invulnerable save, it's a 5-up at best. Now, it doesn't affect demonic invulnerable saves, probably for the best, but like Custodes, suddenly they're saving on 5s all the time. You park it next to a shadow. Yeah, in the mirror, it's amazing because you park it next to Thunderhammer Storm Shields and they're saving on 5s. You park it next to, if you really want to be rude, park it next to a Makari or an Archon and be like, how's your Shadow Field and Lucky Save feeling now? But anyways, so the other thing is that he has a 6-inch heroic. You pay the 10 points, make him a chapter champion because that gives him 5 attack base, gives him reroll wounds against characters. And then he's also innately -1 to be hit in melee.
It's a good point.
He moves. So one of the things that I haven't talked about with regards to the Ravenwing is while they're in the Devastator Doctrine, they get an extra 3 inches of movement and they can advance and shoot. And the biggest part of that is that when you are Ravenwing and you're not playing Successors, because Successors aren't even a consideration for them now, is you get Jink, which is a 5-up invulnerable save against shooting so long as you have not remained stationary. Now, keep in mind, you get that turn 1 because turn 1 you have not remained stationary yet. Then, if you advance, that becomes a 4-up invulnerable save against shell shooting, which means that you go first into the Iron Hands or Guard matchup, you advance everything, and your entire army now has a 4-up against shooting.
It's quite good.
And you are launching AP5 Melta, AP2 Assault Cannons, AP4 Plasma at them for the rest of the game.
Yeah, and then you're also looking at Dark Angels have some fantastically janky stratagems, like being able to run in, punch you, and move away with bugs and things like that. But that can also function as like if you're in an ongoing combat, the unit can just like zip out of combat and then shoot and charge you without having to fall back, which is super helpful for getting around a few things. It's a very, very interesting and dynamic army. I think it's probably just weaker than the all Terminators build, despite being a lot more fun to play, sadly.
It is
the classic 4K problem of the thing that's interesting is also just worse.
But it's fun to go fast. And the other thing the list always has is it almost always has 1 to 2 units of infiltrators because that way you can Stubborn Defiance.
Yeah, without having to see people. You can do it without them. It just really sucks.
Yeah.
You have to do the pre-game move stratagem on a squad of bikes, and that is really sad.
Well, and then they're also stuck there for the entire game. But that's the 2 builds for Ravenwing. One is very heavily reliant on Codex Warfare and the Devastator Doctrine being active all game, so that's where they're getting their strength from. They didn't really gain that much in points, like maybe 150 to 200 points on most lists.
It's like 200 just from the Terminators, right? And then
if you're running 20 Terminators, yes, it is 200 points. So I keep thinking back to the list that I'm running where I've barely gained anything on the Terminators. But yes, if you're running Terminators, you gain 200 on that and about another 150 on the speeders.
But what you are getting is plus 3 inches of movement for the entire game, getting to stay in Devastator Doctrine and the better secondaries.
Exactly. And then the Deathwing, it's benefiting from free war gear, like an insane amount, like a 10-man brick of Terminators with Thunderhammer Storm Shields, a Watcher in the Dark, which is a free deny the Witch once per game, which rerolls against Chaos, which is very funny. And then 2 Cyclone Missile Launchers used to cost 485 points. It now costs 330. So the 50 of them that you're running before was about 2,500 points before you count the characters that you're taking. So that list went down, I think it was around 700 points when you include the character counts.
Yep. it's an absurd list that just shouldn't exist.
Yep. And the thing is that there's very few people running it, partly because it's boring, partly because it does actually take a little while to hobby up. And if you're looking for legitimate models, they're almost impossible to find right now.
Yeah, I just don't want to buy 30 more Terminators, if I'm being honest.
That's me. I don't want to build another 20 Thunderhammers.
Yeah, I got 10 Thunderhammer Stormshield Terminators. They're dated models at best.
Mm-hmm.
It's just...
And the speeders are just so much more fun to work with.
I mean, yeah. I bought 3 more speeders, and I'm waiting on them showing up. And I've had like 3 messages from the guy I bought them from, and he'd be like, "Yeah, these aren't in stock yet. Yeah, these aren't in stock yet." It's like, it's cool, bro. I don't need them that badly.
I think one of the more interesting things then to talk about is we'll start with Iron Hands, just to make this even harder for Jeremy to cut apart later to make 2 videos out of, and then we'll talk about Dark Angels. What I think people would be interested in hearing is kind of what are some bad matchups and like what are some counterplay aspects for armies playing into either Iron Hands or playing into Dark Angels.
Bro, I don't know. I've not lost a game with Iron Hands since Arc Civil War dropped, and I played like 20.
So I think one of the things to ask then is like, what have opponents done, if anything, that's made you think, oh, that could be a problem?
Ran at me real fast and tried to damage that you, and it's like, yeah, man, it's going to be real stressful, and it doesn't always work. Like Orclus tried it and it just bounced. But that's the rough thing, is when you just get ran at, because you've only got so much Carrot Punch in an Iron Hands army. There is some good stuff, and I was running Hecaton in that build. Don't run Hecaton; he's really bad, but he's really good into Orcs exactly, which was nice. He does get to just run around picking up squads in that game because they can't kill him. But you can definitely get penned in to your deployment zone. But you're so good at scoring points anyway. Like if your opponent's taking primer off you, you're getting shock tactics. Like it's not that bad. If you recover in the late game, it's like if you get a 0 on like turn 2 and then you recover with like a 4, 12, 12, you probably max shock tactics on the way there. As long as you can pick up on the tertiary, then you're probably not even that down on primary. The other one is just like stuff that can just kill you. So like Iron Hands can definitely just get you. Not Iron Hands. Iron Hands can definitely just get got by an army that just shoots them first. So Guard is a great example of that. If you play Guard on a board where you don't have a lot of great options, or they just jam at you and they just say, "Look, man, you got to kill these 8 armored sentinels and these Kazakin that have just shot you up from a bunch of stuff." Like you can just flatline die. That is definitely a thing that happens. Francois had it with the Deathwing Terminators build that just previous tournament that just ran at him, and he tried, but it didn't work. The same thing happened to Lennon at Cherokee, because Lennon looked at the boards and was like, "Cool, Iron Hands going to be great on this," and he was right all the way to the semifinals. Because he just jammed it. Deathwing Terminators got the first drop, put a rune in the middle, ran into it, and then ran him over. And he still scored an insane amount of points. Like that was a 10-10 in team play. So yeah, Iron Hands don't have a lot of weaknesses. That's one of the problems. They run enough melee to keep you honest with things like Vanguard Veterans and also to go and take you out. They're running things like Scout Speeders to jam forward, grab primary, alleviate that pressure. And then things like the Contemptor don't mind getting tagged up. Gladiators and Land Speeders are the same. They both have a separate 1 CP fallback and shoot stratagem, which is dumb. It's not the same stratagem. They're identical otherwise. Which means that they're very difficult to tag up. You have things like the drop pod, which just creates an intense amount of like bubble of you need to respect this army so much more until it comes in. And the fact that can now wait till turn 3 to come in just means that you have to wait so much longer before you can, you can't just abandon your backfield against a gunline army, which feels super weird because a lot of the time when you play against a gunline army, the way that you compensate for that is by just having so much stuff in their face. And you can't do that because your backfield will evaporate. And then Eradicators coming off the side, Gladiators coming off the side. There's a really cute thing you can do with Gladiators that I'm going to tunnel on for a second, where if your opponents press you to your backboard edge and you've got a Gladiator Reaper and Strat Reserve, you just put it into combat with them. So even if they've wrapped you, the Gladiator can shoot you out at that point, because you can place into combat for Strat Reserve if they're on your backboard edge. So if somebody's like wrapped your Contemptor or something like that with an Orc army, you can just put your Gladiator from Strat Reserve into combat with them, shoot them out, and fire the bolt onto something else, which is beautiful.
The third lever mistake that GW has made, past the 2 levers of points and secondaries, the third lever is they made strategic reserves free, which takes away consequences for playing something that would ostensibly be a little slower in an Iron Hands army, not for a Ravenwing army, but where you can shove units of Eradicators or Gladiators into strategic reserves just for free. So you alleviate some of the problems with speed because you can just bring eradicators off the edge.
And fragility and struggling to hide them, right? Like Gladiator Rippers are not the easiest unit to hide. They don't fly. They're only movement 10. It can be just a little bit awkward. That is a good question, AP Justice, that we will get to in a bit. So
I think they mean the food soup.
Yeah, I was going to say chaos, but sure. Yeah, we talked about this last episode, but I just think free strategic reserves was a mistake. Or was it last episode? The episode before? Time is meaningless.
We talked about it. Like the intention, or at least the perceived intention, was to be able to protect stuff from being alpha striked, and instead, what it does is it gave, especially shooting armies, extremely powerful beta strikes.
Yeah. One thing they should do, Iron Hands, if Iron Hands was ever getting an actual fix that wasn't just like reverting the changes they made now, is that ignore the movement penalty for firing heavy weapons should just be counters remaining stationary when firing heavy weapons. That way it didn't work from reserve and port edges. They're not going to change that now because it's an 8th edition book. But if I was going to tweak one thing in it, it would probably be that, so that at least there's a little bit of counterplay, and the devs are going to drop in and hit 4s, all these kinds of things. Like I would maybe tweak it that way, and then kill Codex Warfare. Other than that, I think Iron Hands are probably fine. Like the Contemptor is at the point now where I think GW have just decided it's a design decision that it exists and it's part of the faction identity for a little bit, because they've had so many chances to fix it and it's been such a problem for so long that at this point I can't in good conscience say that they've not left it intentionally. So if you're going to leave that, I feel like you've got to hit some other places, and successors were just a mistake in general.
Agreed. Jeremy, let's talk about Ravenwing counterplay and then Deathwing counterplay.
All right. Ravenwing counterplay is actually fairly straightforward. Be a fast melee army, because the army will collapse under that. Mm-hmm. So if you have fast melee assets, so for example, Blood Angels, Orcs, which doesn't really sound like a fast melee army, but when they on that wall turn, they are in your face instantly. Armies that can... What's the best way of putting it? I mean, other shooting armies is the other bit. It's a coin flip in that particular case. You look at the Tau, you look at the Guard, you look at the Iron Hands matchup, and it's very much a who goes first or whose resources crack first. In the case of Tau, it's usually who rolls more 4-ups, because that will decide whose resources are still alive at the end of round 1 or round 2, and then it just will cascade the other way. I had a game, the one game that I've lost with my current list was against Tom Ogden, where he bounced turn 1, I bounced harder turn 2, and then he picked me up. And so it was just the shooting armies. So in terms of outplay for them, one of the big things for them, like I said, is melee resources. If you can get in and get stuck in with them, and find some way of preventing fallbacks, then they will collapse.
The notable reason for that as well is because Jink, the defensive mechanism that Ravenwing have, is purely against shooting, so it does not work in melee.
Yeah, they get shredded in melee. They have the army is T5 and T6 with a 3-up armor save. So if you are demons, melee GSC, I know, or Blood Angels or any of those factions, if you can. And this is player place terrain advice here, but if you can stage your ruin such that they don't get to you before you're able to connect with 1 or 2 good melee resources, their army will just collapse. And that was one of the things.
You can ruin hop like a World Eater's army can. Objectives don't move. Ravenwing do. Objectives are staying the same where they are. So if they want to control the board, they've got to come to you with something, and that's when you get to smack into them.
And similarly, one of the things that is also a difficult thing for them is the mirror. If you're running Deathwing Terminators, they are going to struggle. I played into them at Stud, and it was the same thing where I killed 36 or 37 of them, but by that point he was on top of me, and it was a 10-point game. And the only reason I won was I had denied him 1 second. I had denied him shock tactics because I did not sit on the middle objective once. Yeah.
That's just good advice in general against shock tactics, I think, is consider whether you're standing on an objective because you feel obligated to or because you need to.
Yeah.
A lot of the time it can be just worth denying that secondary, especially if you're playing a mission where you can make up primary later, so something like priority targets. If there's an objective that's just not worth standing on, it can be worth taking a 4 to deny them 4, because you can recover it back later if you're going to get 3 8s, a 4, and then your 15. That's still super quick math, 44 primary, which is fine. Like if that denies them a turn of shock tactics, caps them to 12. You just cost them, or caps them to an 8 because they didn't get the turn 1. There's definitely a lot of merit in just, stopping. What are you laughing at, Nathan?
Just Dickie's comment in chat, which is say World Eaters, you son of a...
We did. We literally said
we did.
I know, but that made me laugh. I'm sorry, Innes. It was just I saw it and I laughed because chat makes me react and I can't help it.
Right. No, it's fine. And then on the Deathwing side of things, it's fast shooting, lots of wound rerolls. So your example of the Seal of Oath, 30.
It's not a good listing to that, dude. Please don't try and tell people that it is.
Hear me out for a second.
Wound rerolls, consistent mortals is really the answer.
Wound rerolls, mortals is a big one. If they're not running the chaplain with the litany, mortals will rip right through them.
Bro, I would love to play that with my Kraken list from LVO. Just let me out. Let me have it. Come on.
Spore mines were the actual counterplay to that army until
you moved 5 inches. Congratulations.
That's the real problem. Is Tyranids were too good for too long, and now they no longer exist to save you all from the marine meta. This is what you have all wrought by making my faction bad.
Dwarves actually do it because you bypass the toughness.
Again, also, that army does not like getting beamed.
No, it does not like getting beamed. But what it really doesn't like, and this is one of the things, is Thunderkin Grav.
Oh, yeah.
Because you have 3d6 shots at strength 5, so you don't care about the strength, but it's blast, which means you have a minimum of 9 shots coming out of that unit into the 10 mans. And they're flat 3 damage into them, and they're AP 3, AP 4 and half range. Which means that if they're not in cover, you're putting them on your invuln, and if you're within half range and they're in cover, you're putting them on their invuln anyways.
Also, I'm pretty sure, do the Terminators not just nuke a squad with mortals with 4 heroes?
No.
I think they only cost 6 mortals on average, even with full rerolls, is my understanding.
27 shots with 4 heroes?
Because it's only on 6s.
If you run a 10-man Terminator squad, yes.
I'm usually seeing 7 to 9 is what I'm seeing.
So 7-man is the most common, so that's 21 shots. Full rerolls, you get 6 mortal wounds, I think.
Yeah, it's 6 on average. So 6 to 7 on average with us. With even a 10-man, it's only 6 to 7 on average.
Yeah. And then the rest of the shots do almost nothing because you were fishing for 2s.
Yep.
Depends how many judgment tokens
it's funny because rather than World Eaters, the gap that I'm hearing right now is Harlequins. If Harlequins probably hadn't gotten their invulnerable save depleted by one, they'd probably be the perfect situation in this meta.
Harlequins can just go around them, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Harlequins can go around them. The problem is that if you're playing against a smart Deathwing player, they're going to leave 6 or 7 Terminators on every objective, and you just can't budge that. Twilight can dump 5 CP and delete a brick, maybe, but that's about all that you can do.
It's very mission dependent for Harlequins. I think Harlequins are in a position where you can do it. Dark actually is probably the best option because you get AP3 on the Troop Master to actually put into a save. So Dark is probably, and you're doing mortal wounds when you die back. So there's actually a decent few options there. You can do things with Dark with sniping at the character if you're running double Death Jester to try and pick out things like the Penitent Remembrance and the Talamasters. So there's definitely some options
less
there.
Likely to ever kill the Pennant just because he's...
You can probably kill that Apothecary, though.
Yes, because the smart builds around the Ravenwing Apothecary, and he will just die to 2 Death Jesters.
Yeah. Yep. And honestly, the Pennant could as well over 2 turns with the Rift Ghoul.
It's a reason, I think, to take the Marksman Rifle in those Kasserkin squads, actually, is that you can put flat 3 damage sniper rifle shots that also cause 1 to 2 mortal wounds if you can get the auto wound with Born Soldiers.
That one guy, low-key, Eric's new build is running 20 Webers, so I guess.
God.
Oh, man, that's a lot of Webers.
That is... They're what, D3 shots each?
20, so it's 20... They're blast, so it's 60 shots of 20 mortals.
And if you hit, it's over...
They all hit, bro.
Oh, that's right.
They auto hit,
so it's just roll 5 up.
It's just average 20 mortal wounds.
Yeah. All right. So that's 8 dead Terminators right there.
Yeah.
There you go.
So that's an answer, I guess.
Well, given that GSC very much struggle into that matchup because you turn off their +1 to wound and most of your shots are AP1, which they don't care about.
Yeah, it's definitely a struggle bus. GSC actually secondary them pretty well because you can just like sacrifice 3 squads of bikes to move block them and just keep the army there, keep the army there, keep the army there, and hit your like in a teams matchup. I'm fairly confident getting an 8 to 10 out of that game every time.
Oh, 100%. That like GSC will still score into that matchup. It's just it's
in singles play, it's rough.
Yep. So we've talked about counterplay. Do we want to take a brief break and then get to questions?
Let's do the super chat questions, then we'll take a break.
Okay. Where are we going to start?
Let's start at the top of the super chats. So first super chat question. So again, thank you to everybody who's chucked a couple of bucks our way in order to put your question on. Martin, should you stick with Iron Hand successors or switch to DA? I think if you're not trying to win super majors right now, you can play either of these two completely reasonable success. So you should stick with what you're comfortable with. And I know, Martin, that you're more comfortable with Iron Hands. So don't worry about it. 10th edition's coming. The meta is going to be changing in April anyway. It's March now. We're expecting a balanced data slate in like 6 weeks. So don't worry about it. Play what you got at the moment. You'll be fine. If you're not trying to play for the top, you're not trying to optimize out the last 0.5% of your win rate, there is nothing wrong with Iron Hand successors right now. I don't think they're as good as DA, but I don't think that's going to hold you back at almost any level.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think you could definitely win a super major with Iron Hand right now. I don't think that's in any way questionable.
The top list in the game then is that Deathwing list with 40.
No, I think it's not. I think it's guard.
But you think it's guard? Okay, fair.
I mean, Dark Born Heroes rips every list in the game 2 bits right now, with like very few exceptions.
Mm-hmm. No, I'd agree. But again, has to be within a skilled general's hand who can appreciate exactly what you're going to get out of everything.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, I would say in terms of
success. So
yeah, in terms of Iron Hands versus Dark Angels, the only caveat that I would say to that is for teams, we found that Dark Angels are a little bit more reliable in scoring, if only just because they have some fallback resources if they have a bad couple turns. Iron Hands don't really have that same way to recover if they have a couple bad turns because they end up very light.
Don't have bad turns, bro. Pair for yourself. It's fine. It's been going great.
Yeah, pair for yourself is the best answer.
Clown Mode says Votan is best, and I don't know if I could disagree with you more, but thank you for your money. That's not a question.
I mean, Clown Mode is the right title for that person right there, actually, to be honest.
Thank you, Clown Mode. Kelsey Ito says, do you guys know what's going on in the RTC? In general, no, but also to the specific question, also no. The site just has player rankings, not team or faction rankings. Is the ITC dead? Probably not, but honestly, at this point, who can tell?
Yeah, there's been an absolute lack of communication from whoever it is that currently runs the ITC. It certainly doesn't appear to be Frontline because they're not very responsive when people are asking questions about tokens or about event scoring or anything like that. I know we had, like the rankings actually didn't even exist until today for the 2023 season. They just
the 22 ones are just gone.
No, they're still accessible.
Yeah, but they're not like anywhere. You can't.
No, they're not linked anywhere, which is problematic. I'm glad I bookmarked them because it means I can actually go back and download.
We should pin that in Discord somewhere.
Yeah. So we're not involved with any of that, so we don't know what's going on with it. We're as much in the dark as the rest of the community.
But frankly, if you go to stat-check.com/CRS, you can find the most up-to-date and important rankings that are available to anybody, which will tell you exactly how good everybody is relative to everybody else. And we should be the official ranking source for all of 40K from going forward. 100%. Anybody who says otherwise has an agenda.
I say otherwise.
You have an agenda. You don't want to do more work.
Yeah, I don't want to do more work.
We don't want to be an official ranking system of any kind because there are other things that are going along.
However, I have decided that we are one, so everybody just respect us. April Justice says, all right, guys, if you're a soup, what type of soup would you be? P.S. Keep the good stuff's coming. Thank you, Justice. Personally, I would be a nice bowl of fennel and bacon soup. Or Heinz tomato, like either of the two.
Ooh.
Solid picks.
I feel like a tomato soup needs like a grilled cheese to go with it. Like that's a thing that you need. Like a combination.
I'm not gonna lie, I mainly eat tomato soup as a vehicle to have an entire loaf of bread and butter, or like a French baguette, like with just like half a baguette covered in butter. Soup is an excuse to have that.
I mean, for my soup, I was gonna say pho. Pho is the soup of choice. That would be my soup of choice.
Is that really a soup?
I mean, pho is the noodles. It's not the soup, but let's not get too technical with it. We'll confuse people.
Look, anything with a broth is soup. So personally, my favorite soup is an ice cream milk.
What type of soup would I be? Well, then it would be whatever the most generic European soup is in existence, because that's what I am as an American. There you go.
For me, it's either
potato and leek, maybe.
I would be potato and leek soup. Yes, that's what I would be.
Chicken noodle soup, because I love comforting people. Or French Canadian pea soup.
That's reasonable.
Because it's just so good.
Is it not? Should you not be trying to distance yourself from like anything related to French Canada?
No, I was raised in Quebec.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
My dark past suddenly comes out.
This explains so many things about so many other things, but we'll talk about those later.
Yeah, so anyway, thank you, Jeremy, for your service as stat check. We will no longer require you to be involved.
Oh no, please don't do that.
I can't deal with the French. I'm sorry.
Yes, yeah.
Dan Morris says, "Is cereal technically just breakfast soup? Why or why not?"
Yes, because of
it
the
has
cube
a
roll of food.
The cube of food answer because my head hurts.
So the cube roll of food is my favorite thing, and
that is true. The cube roll of food is great.
And it defines cereal as a soup because of this. Technically, I think it's a stew is what it defines it as. But neither here nor there. But if anybody's interested, you can go find
it's just a really liquidy stew. So like that's fine.
Yeah. And you can cause arguments with your friend because there are cold soups, and they do exist. Because everybody's like, well, cereals what is cold, and there aren't cold soups. There are cold soups. They exist.
Mm-hmm.
Right. That is the end of the Super Chat questions for now. So thank you, everybody. We are going to take a short break for about 8 minutes. We'll come back at 1:30, and we will be back to do the questions from the Discord and turn out the show. So thank you, everybody, for being with us for now. We're going to still be here live for the people who are watching the show. We're not going to go anywhere, but I'm going to go and refresh my water and use the bathroom. But we'll be back at the hour. If you are listening to the show, then this will be completely seamless for you. Otherwise, we'll be back short. We'll be back in a second.
This is really just me sitting here, usually waiting for somebody to ask a question. Also, Jeremy's going to be here. Kelsey, Ito, we're not under any NDAs, so we cannot break them. So we don't know anything about the situation, to be honest. You also have a good night, Matthew Atwood. I was glad that you were able to be here with us for today. I would personally say that we'll probably hear some kind of announcement at some point about whatever's going on with the IGC because they've been slow to update. That's just my assumption based on the situation. I have no insider knowledge, although Dickie biting his lip in anxiety probably gives you more information about the situation than anything else. Yeah, sure you meant for Dickie, Kelsey, but this is my chat along with the Stat Check crew. You don't get to have a side conversation with somebody else in it. It's only about me and my needs. And probably Jeremy's needs too.
It's a good question, Kyle. And I will answer that when we get into the main questions.
Yep. What is and Dumfries, we can also talk about that during the question section. Oh my gosh, there's French in our chat.
Omelette du fromage. That's all I got.
Jeremy, I'm gonna brutalize this instead. That's what I'm gonna do.
No.
So I'm gonna do my best American. Jeremy, talor a manaura de la vraie poutine inis vatau pardonor.
I could try and do it in like gammon for like.
Jeremy, tu leur amèneras de vraie poutine inis vatau pardonner.
Jeremy, tu leur amèneras de la vraie poutine inis vatau pardonner.
Oh wow, I said Dumfries right. I'm very proud of myself.
Well, yeah, because most Americans pronounce that dumb fries.
It's true.
To be fair, that is how I would just as a Scotsman. That's what I would say about Dumfries and Galloway. So it's pretty dumb fries.
I think Innes would actually forgive me if I was to bring him some like authentic Quebec poutine.
We
I'm
have
actually
a French Canadian restaurant.
Gravy, so
really,
I just don't really like the stuff. No.
Oh my gosh.
Like if I'm having like turkey at Christmas, I'm dry on the turkey. I can't.
Oh, that's the worst way to have turkey.
That's why I have gammon at Christmas instead of turkey.
Oh, Jeremy, we actually have a French Canadian restaurant that opened here in Chicago not that long ago, and they purposefully don't serve poutine. It's like the thing. They're like, never do we. They only serve poutine on their anniversary. Otherwise, their like advertisement for their website says, "No, we don't serve poutine" at the top of it.
That's hilarious. To be fair, it might actually be that they have issues sourcing good cheese curds.
It could be,
and they don't want to under.
Exactly, it's impossible. There are no such thing.
I mean, you just go to Wisconsin and you get plenty good cheese curds from there. But I understand.
I want everybody to know that I did actually take that note out on my hand earlier, and I have just posted a picture of my hand in the group chat rather than typing it out.
Did you? Oh, that's amazing! I have to go look. Oh, that's great. Rate in your handwriting is funny. It's somewhat good and somewhat terrible at the same time.
I wrote it on my hand with a pen while I was talking. Give me a
play rate in meta balance overview subfaction. Okay, there we go. I was trying to figure out the first word.
It's play rate. Yeah, I know, because it looks like just one P, which makes it be pay rate. For more of this, please just watch us live every week where we talk nonsense for at least a good 10 minutes in the middle of our episode.
I've missed this bit. This was the best bit of Fight Club, was when we just stopped for a bit. Because as always, the best bit of Fight Club was when we weren't recording Fight Club.
All of our unofficial Fight Club episodes were the best Fight Club episode.
It's a good job Innes lives further north than the north. Otherwise, the gravy comment would get me as well. I used to live in North Yorkshire. It was difficult. Gravy on everything.
I will say that one of my favorite things.
I'm just not a big sauce person. I don't really like sauce in general.
Talking about gravy, somebody gave biscuits and gravy to some like English high school kids in
Brian took us to Denny's.
It was way funnier.
And he tried to get me to get biscuits and gravy or southern
scones
fried
with
steak
gravy
for breakfast. Oh. No, biscuits and gravy or southern fried steak. And I was like, I'm not doing either of those for breakfast.
They're so good though. Both of those things are delicious. Biscuits and gravy is amazing.
I had bacon and pancakes. It was pretty good.
You got to trust Americans with breakfast food. I promise. We'll do you okay.
I'm generally I'm always much more content when I post pictures of my breakfast in the food and drink channel. Like, I'm always very happy with my breakfasts.
I mean, like a nice egg sausage toast, maybe a bit of fried tomato,
bacon, sausage, egg on a cheese roll. That's what I'd do every day if I could.
I have a smoothie every morning now. That's my healthy thing.
Kelsey says, as someone who works with data for a living, I love your site. Thank you, Kelsey. It is a massive work of love from Jeremy and Jeremy and Cliff, and also all the other stats guys. And also, we show up sometimes to write words on it.
Sure.
So thank you. We really appreciate that. If I was going to play World Eaters, what list would I play? Absolutely 100% Angron and Scarbrand.
Fuck yeah. It depends on how much fun are you trying to have and how many times do you want to resurrect.
If I was playing World Eaters, it is purely for the banner at this point. So Angron Scarbrand every time.
Angron Nothing Scarbrand. Funnier than Warp Locusing in Scarbrand off of Angron.
Exactly.
I think
here's the angry dude to give him a 40-second attack. That's what he needs.
Yeah. And also that will then go in and tag stuff so he doesn't get shot.
Well, they both do that, right?
Well, yeah, but the no fallback. I mean,
yeah. Doesn't Angron already?
Scarbrand's you give up an attack for doing that.
Oh no!
I know, it's terrible.
Somebody just came up with a new peach emoji in our Discord. Like they just posted it. It's kind of funny.
Yeah. I will absolutely be making that making that an official emoji for the channel if it's in an accessible format.
It's like the GIF. It's a peach eating popcorn.
That's fantastic.
What you'll learn, it's in the landing section.
Oh, that's just if you pay for Turbo, you can access all of the peach nitros. Anyway, we should go back to the show in a couple seconds.
Do we want to give us a 10-second pause so Jeremy can stitch this together?
So we're going to shut up for a couple minutes and let
I love you all.
Fuck you all. Hi everybody, and welcome back to Stat Check. Thank you for bearing with us with that short break. We probably put in like the Goonhammer bumper there because that's an easy place to do it. We're going to jump into the questions from Discord now. So let's just start at the beginning. What we didn't do this week was like handily collate them all because I don't know. Cliff decided he hates us this week, maybe. So it's just back to the good old usual of me scrolling through the channel and getting shouted at by you guys.
People did a really good job this week of mostly keeping the discussion to the discussion section, at least.
As always, mostly.
All right. I'll actually start because the first question is for me. Specifically for Curie, Jeremy, what would be cool to hear about more what you do, and do you need any help? So I've talked about this a couple times, but essentially I'll answer the second half and then I'll go through and then I'll explain why. I don't really need that much help most weekends because the actual thing that consumes my time, so collecting the events, so finding out what events are taking place takes like 5 minutes because it's going through BCP and then loading up each of the other sites that I check. So if I'm looking at Down Under pairings, I'm looking at mini
tourneys, the French one.
Yeah, the French. I'm blanking on it now. T3 and Tourney Keeper. That's usually all that's left because tabletop.to died last year.
And then occasionally a new hellish one will pop up.
That's like Pun Pun.
I love Pun Pun. Pun Pun's so much fun to use because it's the worst of all the options.
It's the worst to get lists out of. It's the worst to get matchings out of. It is actually painful.
I might run my next event on Challenge just to see if it breaks you, but
Challenge actually isn't that bad for me.
No?
But I just don't.
I'll do it on an Excel spreadsheet. We'll go back to the old days. Anyway,
if you give me the Excel spreadsheet at the end of it, I'll be happy.
No,
so anyways.
no. Pictures of the screen.
The best. Pictures of things are the best.
Anyways, so the big thing that I get that I do is I will go through, I'll grab it. I have a bunch of Excel scripts that will allow me to manually scrape from whatever site I'm using to grab all of the players' names, their declared factions, and then in a separate tab, I'll grab and I'll scrape all of the pairings and scores. Now, sometimes I have to go through and fix all of that because scores are reported in differential. I have a script that will fix from differential to an estimated 0 to 100 scale. It's not perfect, but it at least then makes everything more or less unified for the back end stuff that we look at differences in scores, so we don't have 0 to 20s messing up 0 to 100 scores. I do the same thing with if I run into an event like Germany, where they're using a 4-point differential system with a 0-point draw limit.
You're gonna love the. Do you remember the old WTC4 one that was proposed, where it was like the 71 points for the point out? Gothcon's using that next month.
All right, as long as I find out. And then some tournaments, like again, the German one was using a modified win path where your first round gave you extra battle points instead of actually using the win path metric in BCP. So like if you won round 1, you got an extra 12 points on top of whatever your 0 to 20 score was. If you won round 2, you got 8 additional. You round 3, 4, 2, and then 0 for round 5. And it kind of put in this incentive to keep playing, even if you lost your first game, or if you won your first game and lost your second, you could still place fairly high. I don't fully understand it, but yeah, so go through and fix all of that up. That usually takes me about another half hour or so. But the thing that takes me hours some weeks is list checking. And I have it down to a science now where when I did LVO's 900 and however many lists that it was, I think it was 973 lists, it took me about 3 hours to read through every single list. And it was open up a series of tabs, skim through, make sure that everything was declared as it was, do a cursory check to see if I'd missed an allies, and then keep going. Thankfully, Arcs of Omen has made things really easy because everyone has an Arcs of Omen detachment now. And that is how I'm classifying the main faction for this season, at the very least. You may notice that on the dashboard, Chaos, Imperium, Forces of the Hive Mind, and Eldari are all gone. And that's largely because it's a matter of your Arcs of Omen detachment chooses your secondaries for you. And so we really care about that more than anything else. And then in sub-faction, I will then track.
So much better this month, so much easier this month. That's great.
It will make things a lot easier because the data will be there. You won't have Chaos where it has like Thousand Suns, Chaos Demons, and all the rest of the mess in there. And then in the sub-faction, I'll track the sub-factions that are within the Arcs of Omen detachment, and then any allies, or if there are any. So that's why you'll see things like, if you look at World Eaters right now, there's, I think, 4 or 5 different classifications for World Eaters. There's Disciples of the Red Angel, there's World Eaters, and then there's World Eaters with like Chaos Demons, Worthy Offerings, and I think Hellforged Construction. A bunch of different Chaos Knights, basically. So that is what I do in a nutshell every single weekend. Most weekends, it doesn't take me that long. This weekend, it actually took me the better part of Monday. because there were 930 players this past weekend across 13 different events.
So what we should probably do is get a Discord channel and just let people, if they want to check an event for us and be like, this was any mistakes we found, we can maybe do that. And then if people want to chuck a hand in, they can.
I have had people help me in the past. The big thing that often comes down to it is I don't want to have to redo it. So I would have to, if you were to help me out, it would be
you'd have to trust them.
Understanding that they are doing things in exactly the same format as we currently do, because that way the data collapses and collates nicely. And I don't have to go back through and double check it. And that's the main reason why a lot of people have reached out to me over the last year asking if I need help. And I very rarely take them up on it. Also because I enjoy reading through most of these lists. That's actually the more enjoyable part.
He knows what everything in the game does.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of these things where that's part of the reason why I'm the coach for Team Canada, is that I keep an eye on everything that's going on.
Yep. It was one of the better parts of when I was doing it too. I no longer do it because Jeremy has taken this burden upon himself, basically. Also, Jeremy has a better toolkit for doing it than I ever had. But reading all the lists was kind of a more interesting feature of doing that for a while, because you did get to see what everybody was playing. And you also got to see some random nonsense, like the Chaos Demons player who named all of his Chaos Demons and gave them all background stories. That kind of stuff is really funny to see. And sometimes you get the occasional photograph of a piece of scratch paper with math done on it by hand.
You ever see the Nick Nanavati LVO or the Reese, I think it was Reese did a Nova, where his list was literally written on a napkin and pictured, put into LVO?
So
it was awful.
The very first event that Zach Como, our resident guard player, played in, he has a record of it, and it was a list written on a napkin, taken a photo of with his phone, and then uploaded. I don't actually see that many of those these days. Most people are pretty good about it. The most frustrating is when people, so I'm going to give a little hint. When you are uploading your list to Best Coast pairings and you're copying over from Battlescribe, when you long press to paste, select paste as plain text.
Or copy and paste into Pastebin first.
Sure, but that's if you're doing it on a computer. If you're doing it on your phone, you don't have that option.
You can copy and paste into
Pastebin but
first.
It doesn't. Yeah, you can. I guess you can do that.
Or
but one of the things
that your notes app on your phone or whatever, just get it out of Battlescribe, put it into something that will appropriately deal with the white space.
Yeah, because what it will do in that particular case is it will avoid the block of text that you sometimes get in a list submission. Because if you just paste, it doesn't read it right sometimes. I don't know what's going on in the back end. I'm not a programmer, but I found that that's the fix that makes it work. So those are the most annoying, is when it's just a block of text and I have to slow down, pause my cycle, so to speak, and look to see where things are at. And look for those sub-factions. Look, okay, he's Emperor's Children. Okay. Do I see any allies in there? No. Okay. Because it's, by now it's very quick for me to see detachment breakdowns and all of that, because I've looked at, I don't know, 30,000 lists in the last year.
Fair. What's our next question?
Ignoring the fact that they're garbage, are there any decent options for Raven Guard shenanigans these days?
So there was a guy in the UK who did pretty well. I think he went 3-0-2 with a super aggressive build, running aggressors and outriders and things like that, which definitely feels like it could be fine. There are definitely a lot of characters floating around in the meta, things like tank commanders that are a super great target for surgical strikes for that +1 to hit and wound. I really like Shrike. I think Shrike is a super strong data sheet that's just hampered by being with the Raven Guard chapter tactics. But that dude is a gene stealer, and he has damage 2 lightning claws, which is really cool for you could go and assassinate the Finial and things like that. It's definitely not the worst thing in the world, but it's tied to a pretty bad chapter tactic. It doesn't really feel like they do anything better than Space Wolves is really the problem. You get one unit that's pretty fast with the advanced charge stratagem. You can have another one you have the aura advanced charge for jump packs. So there's a lot of things in there, but it's all tied to marine bodies, which is ultimately the problem. So you're looking at Born Heroes and Whirlwind of Rage, and Space Wolves just do it better and more consistently, unfortunately. But you could definitely build a budget version of that has merit and gets a bit more of an alpha strike, but you're definitely having to lean into that coin flip aspect to get a lot out of being Raven Guard. And that's probably the real problem, is that they're just, you're opting into a coin flip with a melee army at that point to have like a super heavy alpha, quote unquote. And that's just not really where you want to be as Marines. Yeah. Blade Guard are definitely much better than a lot of the options that you had for Master of Ambush once Centurions got removed. But Aggressors are a good choice for that as well. Personally, 10 Desolators would be a great option for that. I think that'd be hilarious. But
no, please don't. Just Aggressors. Just do that.
10 Desolator Marines with Master of Ambush, bro. I reckon that would be hilarious. Imagine the look on your opponent's face when you do that to them. I don't know. It all seems very fine, but it's also one of those where it's like you're playing an 80% option when there's 100% options out there for Space Marines.
It's definitely what it is.
So I do want to put a caveat out there that a lot of the lower performing Space Marine factions are also suffering from just a lack of play, because the players that are playing Marines, that are chasing the meta, that are looking to play the best, have recognized that 100% option exists, so they just aren't even trying to play with them. And so you largely have faction diehards that are still playing them and aren't necessarily always the best at playing those factions.
Definitely. Yeah, there's something to be said always for competitive abandonment in factions, just leading to a loss of innovation, which leads to a further depressed win rate. You saw that with AdMech for a long time, where you had maybe like one person who was trying to make it work, but one person alone can't innovate enough to carry a faction. What?
Untrue. Eric Lathros exists, and he is beautiful.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that.
Well, you can occasionally have one person who's a genius, like just an absolute genius who carries a faction by innovating. But I would say that's the outlier in the situation, and 90% of the time, it's not possible for those factions to innovate enough to keep up with a meta if they don't have somebody or multiple people really who are pushing the competitive edge on that faction.
Yeah.
Man, we have long questions coming up on this too.
All right. With the GW team event coming up, what's the best faction lineup for 5-man teams given board choice is not an option?
Whatever your players play, bro, it's 5-man teams. You can only, you should probably have Guard, you should probably have Dark Angels, you should probably have 2 super heavy scoring lists that will just get points consistently, and then whatever your best player plays that isn't that is realistically the answer. I would probably take Genestealer Cults and Harlequins, or Genestealer Cults and Orcs, or 2 of those, and then your last one could be AdMech if you've got a great AdMech player, or and if you don't have Dark Angels, then Iron Hands or Space Wolves aren't bad options. I wouldn't play Knights on those boards. That seems like a hard troll. World Eaters would be another great option in there.
Is the GW event the one that's allowing faction duplication? I can't remember anymore.
We don't know yet. In previous years, their team events have allowed faction duplication,
which in Dark Angels case,
yeah, and maybe one Iron Hand player because it's funny.
No, you shouldn't do that. That seems like it's trolling.
But yeah, if they don't allow faction duplication, I would say Dark Angels or Iron Hands, preferably Dark Angels, Guard, and then GSC Orcs, and then a 5th flex option.
Yeah, I would be like GSC Orcs, World Eaters, and
World Eaters.
Harlequins. Pick 2 of those 4 to get your consistent scoring armies in. If you have a Hail of Doom player, Hail of Doom is a good option instead of Harlequins. And then after that, it's kind of up in the air. You could run Votan if you want to have something that can put the hurt onto a few lists. There's a lot of, or you could just go for 3 of those scoring lists and you'll not be upset.
Mm-hmm. Right.
In Magic, there was a period of time where winning the World Championship event would grant the winner the opportunity to design a card with their likeness as the art. Assuming the following: whatever you submit to GW would be balanced. And your goal is to make something that mechanically fits into an existing faction. What would you create for your faction of choice?
There's Harlequin units that have never featured outside of lore, but in the game, they have mime units, which were infiltrators for Harlequins. Those would be really cool. Getting those.
They can't have your likeness, Nathan. You never shut up.
Is that true? I don't think that's true about me, Ennis.
I just wanted to slide you off.
I feel like this. feel like that's fucking broadcasting a little bit, bud. I think a mime unit for Harlequins would be cool. Damn.
You would want them to have your face.
Sure, why not? They can
Would
all
it be
have
like a
beards.
mime character or a mime unit?
No, a mime unit. They'll all have beards. They'll look like me. They'll wear PhD outfits. It'll be great.
Right. Okay. Jeremy, what are you going to be?
I mean, it would have to be something for the Dark Angels, but I mean, honestly, it wouldn't really be from a mechanical perspective, but thematically, I would want a Saffron model, the actual Master of Sanctity for the Dark Angels.
You guys are terrible at this.
I know.
I was thinking you'd pick Lionel Johnson, and then just
no, because that already exists.
Face.
And I do not want to be the face of Lionel Johnson because I do not have flowing locks of blonde hair.
It could be an adaptation of it. You just have flowing locks of brown hair.
All right, it's got to be for a faction with like a really big design space gap that's also got no units. So like, it's got to be an Admech Urchin Circle unit for me. So the melee focused aberrants on bikes. That's what I want. I want aberrants on bikes, all with my face.
No. It's aberrants in the sidecars.
Oh, with the stop signs to just swing them at people as they drive by.
5-man squads, aberrants riding bikes, or aberrants riding gene stealers. One of the two. Like, I'm cool with that. I think that'd be great. Or yeah, I don't know. I want like a dedicated fast melee unit that's not gene stealers and Tyranids.
Oh, actually, I just realized the better one. Beam plane.
Oh, God. With your likeness, it just is your face on the front, like a
Jeremy's face with a laser mouth. The beam plane is something that we should never ever talk about again. I was gonna
actually. I changed my answer. I just to make all the Custodes players, man. I just want to be Valdor, so when he comes back, he just has my face on him, and it just makes people mad forever.
I want to be Russ, but corn, like corn, fallen Russ,
corrupted corn and Russ. Yeah. There you go.
Good combat plus combat trips and takes to note. That's not really a question that's super suited for something like this. I would definitely recommend going and checking out some like YouTube resources or trying to find that Google Drive folder I made, which has a bunch of cool resources for that. But unfortunately, it just doesn't translate super well to us talking about them.
Like a whole episode.
You could look at things like the Lenin maneuver or orbiting, as it's also known, like stopping rogue interventions. Like there are a bunch of really cool things you can do in combat, but it's really hard to describe them audially. So I'm sorry, we're going to skip that one. Now that you are older than the highest mission number in the GT pack, how do you all feel?
I mean, I've been older than that for a while now.
It's episode 33, bro. That's what it's talking about.
I know what it's talking about, and I was making a joke. Don't explain the fucking joke.
Yeah, but we're both 35, so we're already there.
Yeah.
You guys are so old.
Oh, God.
Thanks,
Thank you. I turned 36 this month. Well, in March, which is soon.
Damn, like, I turned 36 in 20... fucking 32.
I was gonna say 20 years in this. Have you been 16 this whole time?
Yeah, bro. It's technically trafficking when Anthony flew me over.
Oh no, let's not joke about that today. Also, which episode thus far has been your favorite? We're just gonna skip right past the old man's question.
I think episode 1 felt pretty good. Like getting to start.
Mm-hmm.
The bonus episode where we talked about Arcs of Omen when it dropped was a lot of fun.
That was really fun. I really enjoyed doing that. But that wasn't really an episode, right?
No, but it was a bonus episode.
I thought our Christmas bonus episode was pretty fun. I don't know. I thought that was just amusing and ridiculous.
Yeah. Actually, no. When we had Falcon on.
That was good fun too. I struggle to be like any specific episode was my favorite because they, in the nicest way, they all kind of blur together because nothing really stands out as being like super bad or super great. It's just all an enjoyable process to make. So I just like coming on here and shooting the breeze for a couple hours every week. That one where I got to sleep when I was super burnt out, that was probably my favorite because I really needed that week.
I also agree that I think this is my favorite part of every week where I get to sit down and just shoot shit with people for a couple hours.
All right. Are you worried that you'll be supplanted by X and 1 as the main show on the network? I would be thrilled if that was to happen.
X and 1 hits a very good demographic. X and 1 is a far... We're kind of trying to focus on we focus on the broad aspects of the competitive hobby, but me and Anthony especially are very dialed in on the top end, and Jeremy is as well, where it can be easy to get lost in this is the optimal. I think we try to make a lot more generalist content as well, but the X-Men and End of the Matrix both benefit from having a super tight focus, where they are about one thing and doing it the best that show can be about that, which means that the show can at times get a little bit meandering, and we're just shooting the breeze a lot of the time because it's a weekly show and we don't always have something super interesting, like super focused to dive in on, whereas those shows are like X1 is also right at the start of his run and burning through all of its super, like all the topics that the guys have wanted to get off the chest like real hard now, and I look forward to seeing how they continue that. But they're definitely not going to be able to cover like 15 topics an episode in a year's time, so I look forward to seeing where they go with it. But no, we're fine. We're number one. That's all that matters. They're X1. We're number one. But I'm proud of both our children.
I'm proud of all of my children. It's true.
You guys can answer that question as well, obviously.
I don't think it will ever supplant Stat Check as the main show. X1 is a really good show, though, and I think you should all watch it, especially if you're busy people trying to make like your competitive 40K life work.
To the demographic, yeah, X1 is not content for me. I said this earlier, but it's not. It's a show that I listened to, and it was super interesting. But it definitely was not. I'm not the person that it's trying to be about. I'm very much about chasing that 1% of extra play and playing 5 games a week. I'm not budgeting my time around 40K. 40K is my time.
I'm definitely the target audience, aside from not being an actual father of X and 1. So I get a lot of value out of watching that show. So I've watched every episode, all 2 episodes that have come out so far. And I plan on watching the rest of them, even though I'm not on it. Just because it's a show that is targeted specifically at the demographic, which is me, where when I can get like a game in a week, I'm pretty happy.
It's also just a wonderful, wonderful piece of content to be out there for people to know that there is other ways to appreciate and enjoy this game competitively. And at the end of the day, anything that grows the community is good for all of us. So if X1 does end up being more popular than us, good, because it deserves to be. If people like it 100%. As much as they do.
Yeah. If it becomes the most popular show on the network, it's because it is making content that is better than us, not for any other reason.
Or because it resonates with more people, like ultimately at the end of the day.
Yep.
When will Violence Vanilla return to host a show End of the Matrix? Never. He was never a host on that show. Typhus was lying. Typhus lied and told us that Anthony was involved in that show so he could get StreamYard access.
And then suddenly Typhus is in our backstage chat.
It's a really good show, though. Enter the Matrix is probably one of the best pieces of content that I don't watch regularly because
Enter the Matrix is my favorite.
It doesn't apply to my life very often.
Yeah. I think Enter the Matrix is the best individual piece of content out there for 40K. It's also hyper focused on one specific thing, which is a strong appeal, but reduces its generalized. Not everybody gives a toss. Ultimately, where is Typhus flying? That's 10 hours away. Typhus is on a holiday in Thailand, I believe.
I believe that's correct, yes.
When are we doing SpongeBob, by the way? We should really organize that.
As soon as you guys get 200 patrons, I will actually schedule it. The challenge currently is just that as we've grown now, I have to try way harder to schedule things. When it was just the 4 of us, it wasn't too bad. Or 5 of us, including Cliff, rather. It wasn't too bad.
3 of us.
Now there used to be 3 of us. That would have been real easy. Now there are 7 of us, and it gets steadily more difficult the more people that we add to our network to schedule things.
It might be 10 soon.
It's going to be after Typhus gets back from his vacation in Thailand. Is essentially what it's going to be. Cool. But we are working on actively doing it.
Chris has asked us to live react to something. This is something I posted in the Discord that you should definitely not click on the link to.
I've already looked at that.
I've already looked at that. I don't understand how to read it is the real problem.
That's fair.
I started looking at it and my eyes started to bleed and I started to get stigmata and stuff like that. It was a terrible experience for my brain.
Kyle N asks, he has a show question. If he changed all the players declared armies on BCP to sisters, how mad would it make you?
Let's not answer that question because I can see Jeremy wanting to the ring through a computer screen and
what I'll say is the chance that Anthony's under your bed is low but never 0.
Also, that actually might cause Anthony will definitely call that bluff with a chair. He'll just come up behind you one day with a metal chair and just hit you with it.
What are the main factors that determine the meta flexibility of an army? How important the numbers of data sheets and to what extent can variety and sub-faction traits make up for having relatively few data sheets? Ultimately, for me, meta variety is how adaptable they can be to people trying to counter it and to shifts in the meta. If an army is super great right now, but then the army that it's preying on that's doing super well falls away and it just doesn't have the longevity, that's not being flexible. And if it can't change to adapt to that situation, so we definitely saw that with things like some armies just disappear without ever getting nerfed, right? That's just not being flexible. Whereas armies that can change or armies that don't need to change are the flexible ones. That's kind of it. There's no metric for it. It's just whether, I don't know.
I wouldn't say that number of data sheets or sub factions necessarily are an implication of that, because you look at a really good example of that is Harlequins over the course of since their codex, actually even before their codex came out, over their last year, they have a very shallow codex, but the army's playstyle has been able to adapt to nearly every single way that the game has changed over the last year, such that they've always remained, while a low play value, relevant.
Yeah, where something like Marines has 1 million data sheets and it did not matter. You had Blood Angels and that was it, and that was not meta adaptability at the time.
Yep. I think secondary scoring is the one feature that kind of overrides some of that, where if your army is good enough at scoring secondaries, it just doesn't matter. Like Necrons for a while, where it didn't even matter, because the army is still played and still is winning. Not as much anymore because of some changes to their secondaries, but existed solely in the meta because of its secondaries.
There was also I was speaking to a client about Eldar recently, and I could not distill an Eldar list down to a core of like, this is what an Eldar list looks like. There is so many options and flexibility in that book, and every single person is building their own spin on Eldar, whether you're Vic or you're like the German guys playing it, or you're some of the guys playing it in the US, like James Kelling, or Ben Sherman. There's no consistency in what those lists are doing. They are all, they have the same core. You're going to see a Farseer. You're probably going to see Baharoth or another Phoenix Lord. You're probably going to see like the Howling Banshees and some Striking Scorpions. And like after that, the list building for that book is so open wide, and it doesn't matter. That book is only okay. Like there's maybe a build that's great and a bunch of builds that are fine, but is that flexibility, or is that just being a consistent book that has a bunch of options that are okay but not great? Like I would say that's pretty flexible. You can always find something in it that's 50%, but it's not hitting peaks, right? So, or then you've got Grey Knights, which is the opposite. Grey Knights has a build, and sometimes it doesn't matter because that build's good, and sometimes that build is bad, and yeah, cool.
Yeah.
So flexibility is always flexibility and power are very linked, I think, is the ultimate gist of this. If a book is powerful and flexible, it's probably broken. If a book is powerful and inflexible, it's probably going to get adapted to, and that was Drakari problem. Where you couldn't just adapt to Drakari at the time because Drakari just adapted back.
Mm-hmm. So Ennis, how does GW safely and appropriately nerf Genestealer Cult, and then how do they actually do it in Kill the Faction?
Safely and appropriately. This is a question. I need a second to move on to the next one. I'll come back to this.
All right, we'll come back to it in a second. I think this one's actually more interesting because it removes all the context of why fantasy ended, which is actually the answer to the question, which is what will end times 40K look like or come? When will it come?
And it was in 7th. Did you guys miss it?
It will come when 40K stops making Games Workshop money.
Yep.
Now, fantasy stopped making Games Workshop money, and so they end times it and made it into Age of Sigmar, which has been a relatively successful game since then, despite the clamoring of people who loved fantasy so much that they hated Age of Sigmar. I've actually been looking at picking up an Age of Sigmar army recently, which is also just going to make a bunch of people upset, probably.
Yeah, I think it really comes down to like they're not going to end times 40K unless the game just stops being played.
Yeah, I think that's the key. Is that if it ever stops making them money, they'll rebuild 40K from the ground up.
But the fact is that the game continues to grow at a somewhat alarming rate, actually.
Yeah,
when you look at their numbers
all the time, which is kind of funny.
Yeah, like if ever you see a year to year where their sales for 40K have stagnated, that's when the warning bells start to go off. But that has not happened.
Yeah.
In a very long time.
I guess we can try to answer one more question then while Innes contemplates his death. What list building insights have you gained from looking at so many lists, Jeremy?
That's a good question, actually. The one thing that I have gained kind of the ability to do is to glance at a list and see why certain choices have been made and what they've left on the table in exchange for them, because you'll see 20 different lists for the same faction. So say as an example, Guard is the biggest focus right now. It's one of the most heavily played factions. And you look at it and you see, for example, I look at a typical Guard list and the things that I'm looking for are present in some and not present in others. And it's interesting to see the sacrifices that they've made to do that. So for example, Guard lists that are doing really well right now have 5 to 6 Russ Hulls, 2 to 3 units of Kazakhin, and I'm answering Dumfries' question at the exact same time here is 5 to 6 Russ Hulls, 2 to 3 units of Kazakhins, Lord Solar, usually a command squad with the Finial, 3 units of mortar teams, and then after that, it's usually some Sentinels for forward deploy or armored Sentinels for
that definitely already sounds like 2,500 points, and it definitely
amusingly enough, that what I've listed out is probably about 1,600 points.
I hate it so much.
Because after that, you can then flex. You can take infantry squads to give yourself some more boots on the ground.
Scion patrol is really good.
An entire Scion patrol for R&D, or again boots on the ground and just getting cheap bodies around the board. You could take a Bulgrin brick if you want to, because they're not all that expensive either. But yeah, it's there. Then you look at it and say, okay, this person took 8 Russes. What did they give up for that? Because they can't fit that much in a list. And usually when it's something like 8 or 9 Russes, they've gone armored superiority and they've given up on Kazakhins, because Kazakhins don't work as well if you're not born soldiers. Or they've included Rough Riders in their list, and Rough Riders take the place of Sentinels for forward deploy, or not to say forward deploy, but for applying forward pressure on your opponent. So I think that's the biggest thing that I've learned from list building, is just being able to look quickly at a list and be like, this could be better if you did X, Y, Z, just from looking at what is the constant. So it's kind of like when we talk about Iron Hands list, the core of an Iron Hands list is very similar for Iron Hands lists that do well. It's 2 to 3 units of infiltrators, a relic contemptor, 2 units of devs in a drop pod, and then the tech marine with targeting protocols, and the lieutenant with Vox Spiritum and Rights of War. After that, it's fairly flexible. If you want to go into melee side of things, you take Whirlwind of Rage and you add in 10 to 15 Vanguard veterans. If you want to, 10 is usually the right number, because your elite slot gets up being pretty full, because you want to take scouts in Landspeeder Storms, because it's 110 points for 5 sniper scouts with a missile launcher in a Landspeeder Storm.
Also the Thunderhammer on that Scout Sergeant.
Yeah, and the Thunderhammer on the Scout Sergeant. But yeah, I think that's the one big thing that I've taken out of reading all of these lists, is being able to distill out what the core of many lists are. And I will say that I agree with Innes when he was talking about Eldar, is that for the large part, there isn't that core. Like there are many different archetypes for Eldar, but there isn't that one core that you're always going to see.
Yeah, for Eldar, it kind of feels like there's 4,000 points and you pick and grab your favorite 2,000.
Yeah.
And there are elements that are like S tier through B tier in that you will take some combination of, and most lists have all the S tier and like some of the A and B, and then some faction choices change that, and then some lists just, like some lists get Bahar off into that, and I think they're all insane, but people do it. And you'll see like the Avatar will show up and do really well for a couple of weeks, and people will start playing that for a little bit, and then other players will move on and they'll go to like 15 Shroud Runners, and then they'll realize they get alpha off the board if they don't go first. And like, it's super variable. Anyway, we're gonna bring it back to GSC, because I have a rough thoughts on this one. So the way I'm going to structure this is there are like 3 things that GSC are probably too good at, and there's like a couple of nerfs I would make to like a few of them, and the way that they make it cool is that they apply a couple of minor compensation buffs to other things to make a healthier playstyle for the book as a whole, and the way that you ruin them is you don't give the compensation buffs. So that's how I'm going to structure this. So the first thing they do too well is they score too many points too easily. So Ambush probably just needs like a point carved off it at most of the steps. it still kind of needs to be pretty good because it's generally pretty limited to only turn 2 and turn 3. And then you can like get points on it later. But I would probably knock it down to like capping back at 4 rather than the 5 that you can get on it now. Or just like taking out one of the criteria again, maybe making it so that it's only 1 point for the crossfire marker again. Just something in there somewhere. You guys cannot mute up because I will just talk too fast. Like everybody knows this. You guys have to ask questions at some point.
So I will be here just to make sure you breathe occasionally in this because it's like an avalanche, right? It gains momentum as it goes.
Yep. So next is in that same category is Brute Swarm, which is also just too easy to score. I would probably just knock off one of the criteria. I think the one I would take off is the do all 4 get bonus point, so that it goes back to 4 cap, and then you can still get the 3 a turn by getting like neutral, your deployment zone, and plus. So it's still a good passive scoring sector because I think GSC kind of need one, especially if you're going to curb ambush as well. So that's like the soft version of the buff is you take off the get all 4, and then if you were going to be like you would take off the whole board if you were going to do it for the like the harsher nerf version. Is probably take off the whole board so that you can still get 4 on it, but you've got to do the 3 neutrals to get the 3 points, and then you always get 4 if you get all of them. So that's probably the harsher one. I think they might warrant the harsher one right now, but it depends on what the other changes that you make that could mean that maybe you go for the slightly more lenient version to keep a passive scoring plan, especially if we're going to lean heavier into the melee assets being a bit stronger in an updated version of the Codex. Then you're on to like the shooting is just a little too good from Deep Strike. My change here is that I would start with hitting the +1 damage stratagem. It probably just needs to be 2 CP on a 20-man squad. So like once you go past 11 models in the squad, it goes up to 2 CP. Or if you have a power level of like whatever the power level is for like a 6-man squad of bikes. So like once you've added past 1 wolf quarter, 1 extra bike, or once you've gone past 11 neophytes in the squad, it's 2 CP for that. So there's at least a resource trade there. Sure. And like I don't think it's broken. I think it's powerful, but it just needs a little more of a limitation on it. So making that a 1-2 or just frankly a flat 2 stratagem isn't too big a deal.
Would you change anything about the myriad cult system that currently exists?
We're going to get to that.
4 points.
Don't worry about it.
I was wondering.
I said 3 points, didn't I?
I was just wondering if it was one of the points.
I think the harsher version is you just make it flat 2 because this is a really strong stratagem, but I think that is sad in that it makes things like the single demo charge going to threat damage. I think that's a fairly healthy and interesting mechanic. That's probably probably warrants a hit with like the full 10-man brick going to flat 3 damage and also damage 2 on the flamers or the neophyte squad. And I think if you did that, you could also make the missile weapons on Ridge Runners, which aren't industrial weapons currently. You could make them industrial weapons at that point because it would then be 2 CP if you were a 2 or more model squad, and then it wouldn't be absurd to have like 9 damage 4 shots coming from them because that's like a 200-point squad with a 2 CP stratagem, and they're incredibly fragile, which gives them a cool, interesting alpha strike option that's vehicle based and actually feels like it's what it should be. I would maybe go there if you wanted to do like a compensation that might have other consequences, and then like. There's the minor one of like the Jackal data sheet probably still just does a little too much, and I would maybe curb off something. Probably change their fallback shoot and charge to just fallback and shoot is where I would start, so that you can't like continually tag things and tie them up. But broadly, I don't think that's too big a deal. That's kind of like a side point that you could hit. I don't think you have to.
You could probably change it to be 2 CP to do both, like some of those stratagems have gone to.
They do it natively on their data sheet, bro.
Oh, I thought that was a stratagem. Dang. No. Oh, that's so much nicer.
They should be they're amazing.
They should just do one of those.
Change their -1 to hit to be just shooting, not shooting and melee. I would do one of those two, maybe. I don't think they need them, especially because if you follow Eric's blog, Eric thinks Jackals are a little bit on the way out because they struggle into a few card matchups. But I think if we're going for long-term health, probably making them not fallback, shoot, and charge, just fallback and shoot is where I would go. Because then they're more like outriders and flanking units rather than continually chain tagging and wrapping you.
Sure.
And then the last one is the mirror cult system. Probably just needs a small redress. I would, if you're just doing nerf, move industrial affinity to a 2-pointer. If you were doing a compensation, I would bring Impassioned, which is the +1 to hit on the charge. I would bring that down to 2 as well, so you can still run the 2 of them together in a melee focused army, but you couldn't just run like the four pops, or I don't think you could really do like swap the points cost on them. So because running them together makes the melee build actually work in a really cool way where you can like get hitting on 2s in combat with like rock cutters. And I think that's super interesting. I don't think that's a bad thing, but I don't think you could make the +1 hit on the charge a 1.1 because that's way too good. Which means that you probably can't make Industrial Affinity a 3.1. Unless you just
you cut it back to 3 from 4.
Yeah, cut it to 3 from 4 would also work, but there's a bunch of them that are 3, which I think is kind of sad in that situation.
Sure.
Where they're like at the point where you're like, are you really justifying saying that the reroll charges one for 3 should be your entire trait?
Yeah.
It's possible.
Now, what about from the perspective of looking at Industrial Infinity, instead of ignoring all penalties, ignoring the malice to hit for
if
the
it was just
weapon
ignore
itself?
move and fire penalty, I think that would also be fine. Or ignoring weapon
because being
penalty.
able to ignore all the defensive profiles of opponents as well is a really powerful
I think a lot of those abilities should just be like a lot of those ignore hit modifiers should be ignore self-imposed ones, not enemy ones.
Mm-hmm.
So like it should ignore your move and fire penalty, your like if you've been fired or you've got a weapon that gives you 1 to hit, ignoring those. I think ignoring defensive buffs and forests is
counter stationary if in the shooting phase.
Yeah, but counter stationary then means it doesn't work from reserve, which is like the whole Gene Circle thing.
Oh yeah, that's right.
There's
actually,
already
that would have a really bad knock-on consequence.
So I think you've got to be really careful with the change to this infrastructure because it's like there's a lot of really interesting things in the mirror cult system, and getting 4 things seems like a lot. Like 2 of the ones you take are pretty garbage. Like Cold Eye Killers is not great. Synaptic Resonance is okay. It affects 1 model in your army usually. Excuse me. So like going up to 2 would hurt the build without killing it. And I think with the combined set of changes, if you were just going to change the mirror cult system, I think that would be not enough. But I think with other changes to the ecosystem there, it would be enough to make Gene Cults just a little bit weaker without taking the edge off it.
So what are the compensatory buffs that you were thinking of then?
I went through those. So that was when I was like, there's a softer version and a stronger version that you could do in those.
I see.
So it's like you do the softer one or you only change one of the things. So that's kind of like if you want to crush them, you do the one. If you don't, you do the other. So that's you make it 1, 2 depending on power level or squad size, or you make it just flat 2 for the +1 damage one. And then which thing you take off of Brood Swarm, which point you take off of Ambush would be the ones that are like, some are better than others. Like if you take the 1 point off the Have a Crossfire token, or if you take the 1 point off of the kill unit with one that's out from reserve, would probably be the ones that I would look at. And then whether you take away like one or both from Jackals, or if you take anything away from Jackals, and then you could increase points as well. But I like the Gene Circle for like a Horde army. Like 6 points is expensive for a Guardsman, regardless of its rules. And the melee stuff is expensive as is, and like can't really change. Like 9 points is already extortionate for an Acolyte. When you compare it to like a Harlequin troop, it's disgusting. And then Industrial Affinity. I think if you were just flat nerfing, you increase Industrial Affinity to 2. If you're compensating, you bring in Passion down to 2 as well. Is where I would start.
Sure.
There is honestly the actual argument I would make is that most things should just be 2 in that, and you go up to 5 points, and you get to pick like 1, 2, and 1, 3, or a 4, and then that would be a lot more interesting. But it gets super weird. I would at that point be like, I would actually probably want to go to 6 and have like a bunch of 4s, a bunch of 3s, and a bunch of 2s. So you can have a 4 and a 2, 2 3s, or 3 2s would be what I would actually want to do. But that's like scaling it super hard and fundamentally rewriting it, and that's just not feasible.
Sure. What about want to tag
if you were? Sorry, I was just saying. What about if you were from again? We'll last question on the mirror calls. I'm curious about how this would work. What about if you were to group them and say you can take 1 from this group, 1 from this group, 1 from this group?
Yeah, it's fine, but it's changing. It's like I don't want to fundamentally change the mechanic. Is the ultimate end of that? Like that's making it like the Tau spike system with like the sectors kind of thing. Which you could do that, but I don't know. I feel like it loses some of its uniqueness with it being myriad cults, where it's like all of the options under the sun because there's a million different ones. There's only 1 really, but I guess 2 because some people play Synaptic Resonance.
Makes sense.
I don't want to hit it too hard. The real one that I actually want to see for Gene Cults is the Icon Ward to be able to do his banner when he sets up from reserve, the action for the boss one to charge, and to just lower the distance they come away to 7, so you could actually hit charges from reserve. That's what I actually want to see, but they're just not going to do that. The difference between 6 and 7 at that point becomes academic. But they're just the unreliability of hitting charges from reserve with GC is the real problem, and why you can't justify playing melee builds that don't play on the board. Ultimately, you get 1 fairly consistent charge with the trap sprung, and that's it. That's all you get.
That makes sense.
Or just make a trap sprung a generic mechanic that everything has. 3 dice drop the lowest charge on the turn you set from reserve. that's what I would look at. But ultimately, the secondaries are the real problem there. They just need a bit of a hit so that Gene Circle are a little more incentivized to play the game with you, because they're already just naturally, passively, because they're a deep striking troops army, passively great at secondaries. So you can't also have great secondaries on top of that and expect them to be reasonably fair. That's why Harlequins are a problem all the time.
Makes sense.
Yep. Anyway, apparently this is monthly Innis whinges about GSC or rants about GSC or tells you.
Do we want to? There's Ashley asked when we were going to get ASMR tracks. Did we put out ASMR tracks, or did we ever put out the
no
science ASMR? Okay, we'll just do that at some point. We'll put out science.
We're very
ASMR.
sorry, but we just can't accommodate that at this time.
I mean, we can, but it would be just science sounds.
It's definitely a higher Patreon tier, though. All right, we should wrap up. Thank you so much, everybody, for being with us this week. We hope you enjoyed this bumper episode, I suppose, because we can't stop talking about Gene Circles, or I can at least. We really appreciate you all being here. We'll be back next week for episode 34. If you want to hear more from us, you can check us out at youtube.com/c/statcheck. You can see a bunch of back content, or you can sit around and wait for 160 hours for next week's episode. I recommend doing that. It makes us look cool if we've got somebody waiting for that long for a live stream. Otherwise, you can check us out at patreon.com/statcheck if you want to support us a little bit more and get access to our awesome Discord and be part of the community. We're going to be starting a TTS league. We're apparently going to be we're doing like some miniature golf thing, which is like painting models and selling models, which is doing really well for getting people a bit of impetus. And you can check out all the hosts of all of your brand new favorite shows like X&1 and Enter the Matrix, and also us, apparently. Have a great time. We'll see you next week.
Bye-bye.
Brother.